The scent of French fries clings to my uniform as I slide the key into the lock, my hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. 3 hours past closing, and I'm finally done with inventory. The thought of Greg waiting at the police station with his midnight dinner keeps me moving despite my aching feet. The empty parking lot stretches before me, illuminated by flickering street lamps that cast strange shadows across the cracked asphalt. Being the manager means these late nights are part of the job, but something feels different tonight. The air feels heavier, charged with an electricity that makes the hair on my arms stand up. I clutch the paper bag of leftover chicken sandwiches and fries close to my chest as I hurry toward my car. The sound of my footsteps echoes off the surrounding buildings, creating an unsettling rhythm that seems to follow me. I've made this walk 100 times before, but tonight, the distance feels endless. My boyfriend Greg's night shift at the police station is just a 10-minute drive away. He always tells me I don't need to bring him food, but I know how grateful he is for something other than vending machine snacks during his graveyard shift. Besides, it gives me an excuse to see him, even if just for a few minutes. The key fob chirps as I unlock my car, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent lot. I slide into the driver's seat, immediately locking the doors and letting out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The familiar smell of vanilla air freshener helps calm my nerves as I set the food on the passenger seat. The police station parking lot is deserted when I arrive, save for the patrol cars lined up like sleeping giants. I park near the entrance, texting Greg to let him know I'm here. He can't always come out right away if he's handling something, so I settle in to wait, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. A movement in my peripheral vision catches my attention. Through the passenger window, I see a figure approaching from the shadows between the patrol cars. At first, I assume it's Greg, but the silhouette is all wrong. Shorter, broader, moving with an uneven gait. My heart rate picks up as I realize it's definitely not Greg. The figure is getting closer, and now I can see it's a man I don't recognize, wearing what looks like a stained hoodie. He's walking directly toward my car with purpose, his face hidden in shadow. I press the lock button again, even though I know the doors are already secured. The man is close enough now that I can see his face. His eyes are wide, unfocused, and there's something about his expression that makes my stomach drop. Without warning, he slams both hands against my passenger window. The impact is so violent that the entire car shakes. I jump, dropping my phone between the seats as he begins screaming incoherently, his words muffled through the glass, but his rage unmistakable. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely find my key fob. The man starts pounding on the window rhythmically, each impact more forceful than the last. I can hear him now. Fragments of words that don't make sense. Something about signals. And they're coming. The sound of breaking glass fills the air as spiderweb cracks appear across my passenger window. My heart feels like it's going to explode as I fumble with my keys, finally managing to start the car. The engine roars to life just as the man picks up something from the ground, a loose piece of concrete. I slam the car into reverse just as he hurls the concrete at my windshield. It connects with a sickening crack, creating a massive impact point right in front of my face. I don't even think. I just hit the gas, tires screeching as I back away from him as fast as I can. Through the broken glass, I see the front doors of the police station burst open. Greg and another officer are running toward us, their uniforms reflecting the streetlights. The man turns toward them, still screaming about signals, his hands raised above his head. I'm shaking uncontrollably as Greg reaches my car, his face a mask of concern. He opens my door, helping me out as his partner deals with the man, who's now sitting on the ground, rocking back and forth and mumbling to himself. "Sarah, are you okay?" Greg's voice is steady, but I can hear the worry in it. I nod, unable to find my voice as the adrenaline courses through my system. He pulls me close, and I can feel his heart racing too. Later, inside the station, I learned that the man had been spotted earlier that evening, displaying signs of being in a mental health crisis. They'd been looking for him to get him help, but he'd disappeared before they could locate him. Greg tells me this as he holds my hand, both of us knowing how differently things could have ended. The bag of now cold chicken sandwiches sits forgotten on the break room table as I give my statement. The whole incident probably lasted less than 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. My car window and windshield will need to be replaced, but I'm safe. That's what matters, Greg keeps telling me. I stay at the station until dawn, unable to face driving home alone in my damaged car. Greg brings me cup after cup of terrible station coffee, and we talk about everything and nothing, carefully avoiding discussing what happened. When the sun finally rises, he drives me home in his patrol car, following behind the tow truck taking my car to the repair shop. That evening, I call in a favor and have someone else close the restaurant. The thought of that empty parking lot, of being alone in my car at night, is too much right now. Greg offers to pick me up after every closing shift until I feel comfortable driving alone again. I know I'll have to face my fears eventually, but for now, I accept his offer with gratitude. A week later, my car returns from the shop looking good as new. The restaurant's owner installs additional security lights in the parking lot, and Greg helps me set up a dash cam. Small changes that help me feel more secure, even if they can't completely erase the memory of that night. I still bring Greg dinner during his night shifts, but now I wait until I see him at the door before I get out of my car. Some might call it paranoid, but I prefer to think of it as being cautious. After all, you never know who might emerge from the shadows on a quiet night. The first thing I notice is Max's ears perking up. My miniature schnauzer has always been more watchful than fearful, but something about his sudden alertness makes me pause mid-step. The creek trail stretches ahead of us, autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet in the growing darkness. I've walked this path hundreds of times before, usually timing our evening walks to catch the sunset over the water. Today we're running late. My Zoom meeting dragged on, and Max had been doing his urgent potty dance by the door for the last 20 minutes. Now the sky has faded to a deep purple, with just enough light to cast long shadows through the trees. "What is it, buddy?" I whisper, trying to keep my voice light even as my chest tightens. Max's head is turned toward the dense brush on our right, his usual bouncy stride replaced by a rigid posture I've never seen before. His tail, normally curved up in a confident arc, is tucked close to his body. I tell myself it's probably just a raccoon or maybe one of the neighborhood cats that sometimes slink through these woods. But Max has never reacted this way to the local wildlife. He usually tries to chase them, much to my frustration. This is different. He's not excited or aggressive. He's afraid. The temperature seems to drop several degrees as we continue walking, though maybe that's just my imagination. The creek bubbles quietly beside us, a sound that usually soothes me but now only serves to mask whatever might be moving in the darkness beyond the trail. I pull out my phone, turning on the flashlight app. The beam seems weak against the growing darkness and creating more shadows than it dispels. Max lets out a low whine, pressing against my legs so hard I almost trip. That's when I hear it, the soft crunch of leaves behind us, slightly out of sync with our own footsteps. My pulse quickens as I turn around, sweeping the flashlight beam across the trail. Nothing. Just empty path stretching back toward the neighborhood, the light catching on wet leaves and tree branches. But as I turn back, movement catches my eye. A darker shadow against the darkness, quickly ducking behind a tree. "Hello?" I call out, hating how my voice trembles. No response. Just the endless burble of the creek and the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Max's whine turns into a low growl, a sound I've never heard him make before. I pick up our pace, trying to appear confident while my mind races through my options. The trail forms a loop around the creek, with the nearest exit still a quarter-mile ahead. Going back would mean passing whoever, or whatever, is behind us. My phone shows only 2 bars of service out here. The footsteps behind us are clearer now, no longer trying to match our rhythm. They're getting closer. I risk another glance over my shoulder, and my blood runs cold. A tall figure in dark clothing is walking steadily toward us, face hidden in shadow, about 50 feet back. Max's growl deepens, and I notice his hackles are raised. "Good boy," I whisper, more to calm myself than him. We're almost home. The figure is matching our increased pace, slowly closing the distance between us. The trail curves ahead, following the creek's bend. I know there's a footbridge just around that curve. Crossing it would cut at least 10 minutes off our walk home. My legs are shaking as we round the bend, and I have to stifle a sob of relief when I see the wooden bridge illuminated by the trail markers. But as we approach the bridge, Max suddenly plants his feet, refusing to move forward. His growl turns into frantic barking, eyes fixed on something ahead of us. The beam of my flashlight reveals another dark figure standing at the far end of the bridge, perfectly still, watching us. My mind goes blank with panic for a moment, before survival instinct kicks in. There's a smaller trail that branches off to the left just before the bridge. It's overgrown and steep, but it leads up to the street behind my neighbor's house. Without hesitation, I turn onto it, pulling Max with me. We scramble up the slope, my shoes slipping on wet leaves. Behind us, I can hear heavy footsteps on the main trail. Max is practically dragging me now, his earlier fear transformed into desperate energy. Branches whip at my face as we push through the undergrowth. I can see streetlights through the trees now, their warm glow never more welcome. My lungs are burning as we finally break through onto the pavement. Mrs. Chen is watering her flowers in the fading light, and the sight of her familiar figure brings tears of relief to my eyes. "Evening, Sarah," she calls out cheerfully. "You and Max are out late today." I manage a breathless wave, trying to appear normal as I hurry past her house. Looking back at the trail entrance, I see no sign of movement in the darkness, but Max's tense posture tells me we're not safe yet. We don't slow down until we're back on my street, the motion sensor lights clicking on as we pass each house. My hands are shaking so badly that I drop my keys twice before managing to unlock my front door. Once inside, I double-check every lock while Max does a patrol of the house, his nails clicking on the hardwood floors. Later that night, curled up on the couch with Max pressed against me, I try to convince myself that I overreacted. Maybe they were just other walkers on the trail. Maybe the gathering darkness played tricks on my eyes. But Max hasn't left my side all evening, and he keeps looking at the windows, letting out occasional low growls. I report the incident to the neighborhood watch group and the local police, who promise to increase patrols around the creek trail. Several neighbors comment that they've noticed suspicious activity in the area lately, and someone suggests organizing group dog walks. The next day, I buy Max a new reflective harness and a powerful flashlight that clips to my belt. I also download a personal safety app that my sister has been nagging me to use. Small precautions that help ease my mind, even if they can't completely erase the memory of those footsteps behind us. We still take our evening walks. Max needs the exercise, and I refuse to let fear rule my life. But we stick to well-lit streets now, saving the creek trail for weekend afternoons when the path is busy with other walkers. Sometimes, when we pass the trail entrance at dusk, Max's ears still perk up, and he pulls me firmly in the opposite direction. I've learned to trust his instincts. After all, he sensed the danger before I did that night. Now, whenever his ears prick up or his tail tucks, we turn around immediately. No questions asked. Some might call it paranoia, but Max and I know better. Sometimes, the darkness holds more than shadows, and it's better to be safe than sorry. The fog rolls across the road like living smoke, thick enough to swim in. Past midnight, driving home from my late shift at the diner, and I can barely see 20 feet ahead of me. The radio crackles with static between songs, adding to the otherworldly feeling that's been growing stronger with each passing mile. I'm taking it slow on these winding back roads, the same route I've driven 100 times before. Mom always says I should take the highway instead, but that adds an extra 30 minutes to my commute. Besides, I know these roads by heart. Every curve, every pothole, every ancient mailbox standing sentinel in the darkness. The heater fights a losing battle against the autumn chill seeping through my windows. I reach forward to adjust the temperature, and that's when my headlights catch something moving through the wall of fog ahead. A figure, hunched and elderly, stepping onto the road with painful slowness. My foot slams on the brake pedal before my mind can fully process what I'm seeing. The car's tires screech against wet asphalt as I brace for impact, my heart hammering against my ribs. Time seems to stretch like taffy as I watch the figure turn toward my headlights, face hidden in shadow beneath what looks like an old-fashioned hat. The car shudders to a stop, and I'm thrown forward against my seatbelt. My hands are white-knuckled on the steering wheel as I stare through the windshield, breath coming in short gasps. But there's nothing there. No elderly man, no shadowy figure, just empty road and swirling fog. I sit there for what feels like hours, but must only be minutes. Engine idling, wipers scraping uselessly against the mist. My mind races through possibilities. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe they ducked into the woods. Maybe the fog is playing tricks on my tired eyes. But I know what I saw. With trembling hands, I put the car in park and grab my phone. The flashlight beam seems to bounce right back off the fog as I step out onto the road. The air is thick and damp, carrying the musty smell of wet leaves and something else, something older and mustier, like mothballs or old books. Hello? My voice sounds small against the vastness of the fog-shrouded night. Is anyone there? Are you okay? No response except the distant hoot of an owl and the steady drip of condensation from the trees. The asphalt is wet beneath my feet as I walk a few paces ahead of my car, scanning the road and the shallow ditches on either side. There's no sign anyone was ever here, no footprints in the soft shoulder, no disturbed gravel, nothing but my own presence disturbing the night. Back in my car, I sit for a moment with the doors locked, trying to calm my racing heart. That's when I notice my phone has a signal. Weak, but enough to do a quick search. My fingers shake slightly as I type "elderly man fog road," followed by the name of my town. The results make my blood run cold. Forum posts, local news articles, social media discussions, all describing the same thing. An elderly man in old-fashioned clothes, appearing suddenly in the fog. Always on this stretch of road, always late at night. Some posts date back years, others just weeks old. One comment catches my eye. My grandmother used to tell me about him. Said he's been appearing on that road since she was a girl. Never causes any harm. Just steps out of the fog and vanishes. She called him the Watchman. A shiver runs down my spine as I scroll through more accounts. Different details jump out at me. The hat, the slow walk, the way he always seems to vanish into thin air. Some people report seeing him multiple times, others just once. But the descriptions are always the same. The low fuel warning light blinks on, startling me back to reality. I put my phone down and shift into drive, eager to get home but more cautious than ever. The fog seems to have thickened, if that's even possible, creating weird shapes that dance at the edge of my headlights. Reach. Every few minutes, I catch myself holding my breath, expecting to see that figure step out of the mist again. But the rest of my drive is uneventful, just me and the fog and the occasional static-filled song on the radio. When I finally pull into my driveway, I sit there for a moment, letting the engine idle. The porch light creates a warm, welcoming glow that helps chase away some of the night's eeriness. Through my kitchen window, I can see Mom at the table, probably waiting up for me despite my telling her not to worry. The next morning, over coffee, I try to tell her what happened. She listens with unusual attention, her usual skepticism absent. When I finish, she's quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Your grandfather used to talk about him," she finally says, surprising me. Said he'd see him some nights when he was driving home late from the factory, always in the same spot, always in the fog. She pauses, looking out the window. He thought maybe he was there to warn people, to make them slow down on that dangerous stretch of road. I spend the next few days researching, digging through local history archives online and at the library. The road, I learn, used to be a main route before the highway was built. There are stories about it stretching back decades, stories about the fog, about the figure, about countless close calls but never any actual incidents. A week later, I'm driving home again on another foggy night. As I approach that same stretch of road, I find myself slowing down automatically, peering into the mist. Part of me hopes to see him again, to confirm that I didn't imagine the whole thing. Another part hopes I never do. The fog swirls around my car, thick as ever, but no shadowy figure appears. Just as I'm beginning to relax, my headlights catch something reflective in the fog ahead. I slow down even more, and as I round the curve, I see it. A truck, skidded halfway off the road, its hazard lights blinking weakly through the mist. I stop to help, calling a tow truck for the stranded driver. As we wait, he tells me he was driving too fast for the conditions, nearly lost control on the curve. "Lucky I saw that old fellow in the road," he says, shaking his head. "Made me slow down just in time." I don't tell him about my experience, or about the others I've read about. Instead, I just nod and wait with him until the tow truck arrives. As I drive away, I glance in my rearview mirror. For just a moment, I think I see a figure standing in the fog, watching. But when I look again, there's nothing there but mist and shadows. These days, I still take the back road home, but I drive it differently now. Slower, more cautiously, especially in the fog. And sometimes, on particularly misty nights, I could swear I see a shadowy figure in my peripheral vision, just watching, making sure I make it home safe. My regulars at O'Malley's pub know me as the bartender who remembers their drinks before they order. It's all about patterns. Jack always starts with a beer at 5 p.m. Sarah needs her martini extra dry on Thursdays. Mike switches from coffee to club soda after 8. Recognizing patterns keeps me safe too, which is why the white van has me so worried. I first noticed it 3 weeks ago, parked across from the pub during my afternoon shift. The driver, a middle-aged man in a baseball cap, came in asking about my car, the blue Civic in the employee lot. He said he had the same model and wanted to know if I had any issues with the transmission. Seemed innocent enough at the time. 2 days later, I spotted the same van outside the grocery store 5 miles from the pub. Different time of day, different part of town, but the same guy with the same questions about my car. My skin prickled as he approached me in the parking lot, that fake casual smile plastered across his face. "Funny running into you here," he said, falling into step beside me as I pushed my shopping cart. "Been meaning to ask, have you ever had problems with your steering column? Mine makes this weird noise." I gave short answers, making it clear I wasn't interested in conversation, but he kept talking, following me all the way to my car, standing too close as I loaded my groceries. It wasn't until another shopper walked by that he finally backed off, retreating to his van with a wave that made my stomach turn. The next week, the van appeared outside my gym, then near the coffee shop where I meet my sister on Sundays, and finally in the parking lot of the movie theater across town. Each time, the same routine. He'd spot me, approach with questions about my car, and hover just a little too long. I started varying my routine, taking different routes to work, switching up my grocery store, even changing my gym schedule. But somehow, he kept finding me. The van would appear in my rearview mirror or be waiting in a parking lot, like he knew where I was going before I did. Tonight, I'm covering a private event, bartending a birthday party at a client's house in the suburbs. It's good money, and I've done it dozens of times before. But as I pull up to the address, my heart stops. The white van is already there, parked half a block away. My hands shake as I text my sister. "White van guy showed up at my private event. How did he know?" Her response is immediate. "Stay in your car. Call the police." Before I can dial, there's a tap on my window. I jump. nearly dropping my phone. But it's just the host of the party, a Monica, coming to help me unload. I get out, trying to act normal as I tell her about the van, about the man who's been following me. Monica's expression shifts from confusion to concern. "That van's been parked there all afternoon," she says. "I thought it was the carpet cleaners working at the Johnson's house, but they left hours ago." We quickly unload my supplies into her garage, and she insists on calling the police. As we wait, she gathers her husband and a few early party guests to walk me inside. I catch a glimpse of movement in the van. The driver is watching us, but he doesn't get out. 2 police officers arrive within minutes. They approach the van while I watch from Monica's living room window, my heart pounding. The driver steps out, gesturing animatedly as he talks to them. Even from here, I can see his face is red with anger or embarrassment. One officer comes to take my statement, while the other continues questioning the man. I tell them everything, every encounter, every location, every conversation about my car. The officer's face grows increasingly serious as she takes notes. "Stay inside," she tells me. "We're going to have a long chat with our friend out there." She pauses at the door. "And ma'am, you might want to have someone check your car. People like this sometimes place tracking devices." My stomach lurches. All those questions about my car, he wasn't just making conversation. He was gathering information, maybe even creating opportunities to get close to my vehicle. Monica immediately cancels the party, sending apologetic texts to her guests. Her husband, a mechanic, offers to check my car right there in their driveway. As he examines the undercarriage with a flashlight, I stand wrapped in a blanket Monica gave me, watching the officers still talking to the van driver. "Found something," Monica's husband calls out, his voice muffled from under my car. The officer documenting my statement hurries over. A few minutes later, she's bagging a small black device as evidence. The next few hours pass in a blur of statements and paperwork. The van driver is taken away in a patrol car. They find more tracking devices in his van, along with photographs of other women's cars. I'm not the only one he's been following. A detective explains that the man has a history of stalking behavior in other states. He'd move on when things got too hot, finding new victims in new towns. They'd been looking for him, but he was careful, always staying just within the law, until tonight. Days later, I'm still jumping at every white van I see, still checking my mirrors for followers. The pub installs security cameras in the employee lot. My sister gives me a personal alarm. Monica and her husband insist on escorting me to my car after every private event I bartend. I start hosting self-defense workshops at O'Malley's on Sunday afternoons when the pub is closed. Women from all over town come to learn, to share stories, to help each other stay safe. Some of them tell stories about the white van, about close calls I never knew about. Slowly, I'm reclaiming my routine, but I do it smarter now. I vary my schedule randomly instead of following patterns. I take different routes home, park under streetlights, check my car regularly for tampering. Some might call it paranoid, but I call it being prepared. One thing hasn't changed. I still remember every regular's drink order at O'Malley's. But now I notice other patterns too. I notice which customers linger too long, who asks too many personal questions, whose eyes follow the female servers. The regulars notice too, creating an informal network of watchful eyes. Last week, a young woman came into the pub, shaken after being followed by a suspicious car. Before she could finish her story, 3 regulars had offered to walk her to her car, and another had already called a friend at the police department. We look out for each other now. Sometimes I still see white vans in my rearview mirror, and my heart skips a beat. But then I remember I'm not alone anymore. I have a community watching my back, just like I watch theirs. We've turned a story of fear into one of solidarity, and that's a pattern I'm proud to be part of. "Did you see that?" Lily whispers, tugging at my sleeve. I almost brush her off. Lily's always been the jumpy type, seeing danger in every shadow, but something in her voice makes me pause. We're only a block away from Video Express, the last rental store in our small town, where we've been walking every Friday night since 7th grade. Now, at 16, we know this route by heart. "What?" I ask, slowing my pace. The streetlight ahead flickers, casting strange shadows on the cracked sidewalk. A car cruises past, its headlights briefly illuminating the empty storefronts of Main Street. Nothing unusual for 8 p.m. on a Friday. "That car," Lily says, her fingers digging into my arm. It's the third time it's passed us. I try to keep my voice casual, but my heart picks up speed. Maybe they're lost. The words sound hollow even to my own ears. Lost people don't drive in circles, passing the same two teenage girls over and over. We keep walking, but now I'm counting cars. A red pickup rumbles past, not the one. A minivan with a family inside, not it. Then I see it, a dark sedan, moving slowly, like a shark circling its prey. As it passes us again, I catch a glimpse of the driver. Male, probably middle-aged, alone. "Just keep walking," I tell Lily, trying to sound more confident than I feel. "The video store's right around the corner. There'll be people there." Friday nights are usually busy at Video Express, one of the reasons our parents still let us walk there alone. The car pulls ahead of us and stops at the curb about 50 feet away. My stomach drops as we realize we'll have to walk past it to reach the store. The driver's door opens, and a man steps out, leaving the engine running. "Hey, girls." His voice is friendly, but something about it makes my skin crawl. "Can you help me with directions? I'm trying to find Cedar Street." Cedar Street is in the opposite direction. We both know that. Every kid who grows up here knows every street by heart. Lily's grip on my arm tightens to the point of pain. "Sorry, can't help," I call back, pulling Lily across the street with me. My voice sounds strange, too high. The man gets back in his car, and for a moment, I think maybe we've overreacted. Then the car makes a U-turn, following us to our new side of the street. "Emily," Lily whimpers beside me. "What do we do?" My mind races through the self-defense class my mom made me take last summer. The instructor's voice echoes in my head. "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't worry about being polite." The car pulls ahead again, stopping at the next corner. This time, when the man gets out, he leaves his door open. "Come on, girls," he says, his voice harder now. "I just need directions. Don't be rude." We're still half a block from Video Express. The street is empty. Everyone's either home for dinner or already at their Friday night destinations. My phone is in my backpack, and I know I'll never get it out in time if he rushes us. That's when I spot Mrs. Chen's flower shop. The lights are still on, though she usually closes at 8. Without hesitation, I grab Lily's hand and run toward the shop's door, yanking it open so hard the bell almost flies off. Mrs. Chen looks up from her arrangement, startled. "Emily, Lily, what's—" She stops mid-sentence, taking in our panicked faces. "Someone's following us," I gasp out. "In a car." He keeps stopping. She's already moving, flipping the sign to closed and locking the door. Through the window, I see the dark sedan crawl past, slowing in front of the shop. Mrs. Chen pulls out her phone. "Hi, Jeff. It's Helen Chen. Is David working tonight?" She pauses, listening. "Good. Tell him to walk over to my shop right now and call the station. We've got a situation." I remember then that her son David is a police officer. The relief makes my knees weak, and I sink into one of the chairs by the counter. Lily collapses next to me, still trembling. Mrs. Chen brings us water and makes us describe the car and the driver while we wait. She doesn't ask us if we're sure, doesn't suggest we might be overreacting. She just listens, her face growing sterner with each detail. 10 minutes later, David arrives in his patrol car, lights flashing. The dark sedan is long gone, but David takes our description and puts out an alert. He insists on driving us to Video Express himself, then waiting while we pick out our movies. "I'm going to follow you home," he tells us as we climb into his car. "And from now on, you call the shop before you start walking. Mom or I will watch for you to pass by." That night, curled up on Lily's couch with our unwatched movies, we try to process what happened. Our parents are shaken when we tell them, but proud of how we handled it. "You trusted your instincts," my mom says, hugging me tight. "You kept your heads and found help." The next day, Mrs. Chen's flower shop has a new sign in the window: "Safe space, open late." Other businesses along Main Street follow suit, creating a network of safe havens for anyone who feels unsafe. The police increase their patrols during peak walking hours. We still go to Video Express on Friday nights, but now we're part of a text group with other regular walkers. We share our routes, check in when we arrive, watch out for each other. Sometimes Mrs. Chen's son escorts groups of younger kids who are just starting to walk there on their own. The dark sedan never reappeared in our town, but its shadow lingers in our awareness. We're more cautious now, more observant. We notice when a car passes too many times, when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes, when something just feels wrong. Last week, I overheard two 7th grade girls planning their first walk to Video Express. Without hesitation, I gave them Mrs. Chen's number and told them about the safe spaces along Main Street. They rolled their eyes a little, just like I probably would have at their age, but I saw them program the number into their phones. Some people might say we're paranoid, that we're teaching kids to be afraid, but I think we're teaching them something else: to trust their instincts, to look out for each other, to know where to find help. In the end, that's worth more than all the Friday night movies in the world. A string of colorful lights reflects off the fresh snow as I check another box of donated toys. The community center's annual Christmas charity drive is in full swing, and as a first-time volunteer, I'm determined to make sure every gift finds its perfect home. That's when I notice him watching me from across the room, the man in the red sweater who's been hovering near my station all evening. "Such dedicated volunteers this year," he says, approaching with what I assume is meant to be a warm smile. Something about it seems rehearsed, like he's practiced this expression in a mirror. "I have some boxes in my car that need sorting. Would you mind helping me bring them in?" I glance around the bustling room. At least 20 other volunteers are working nearby, many of them seemingly less busy than I am. "I'm supposed to stay at my station," I tell him, gesturing to the mountain of toys still waiting to be categorized. "But I can ask Ted to help you. He's handling the unloading area." His smile doesn't waver, but something shifts in his eyes. "I'd really prefer your help. Specifically, you seem to know exactly how to organize everything." He steps closer, lowering his voice. "It'll only take a few minutes. My car's right out back." Warning bells start ringing in my head. I've been here for 4 hours, and this is the first time he's mentioned having donations to bring in. Plus, the designated drop-off area is at the front of the building, not the back. "All donations need to go through the front entrance," I say firmly, picking up a stuffed elephant to examine its tag. "Ted can help you bring them around." He leans against my table, invading my personal space. "Come on, don't be difficult. It's Christmas. Where's your holiday spirit? I just need a hand carrying some boxes. What's the big deal?" Before I can respond, Sarah, one of the event coordinators, appears beside me. "Everything okay here?" she asks, her tone pleasant but her eyes sharp as she surveys the situation. "This gentleman has donations to bring in," I explain, grateful for her presence. I was just telling him about our front entrance policy. The man's demeanor changes instantly. He straightens up, that practiced smile returning. "No problem at all. I'll just go move my car around front." He starts to walk away, then pauses. "I'll be back soon to get your help specifically, okay?" Something in his tone makes it sound less like a question and more like a promise. Sarah waits until he's out of earshot before turning to me. Has he been bothering you? When I explain the interaction, her face hardens. Stay at this station. Don't go anywhere alone. I'm getting security to watch the doors. For the next hour, I try to focus on my work, but I can feel his eyes on me every time he walks past. He makes 3 more attempts to get me to help him with supposed donations, each time becoming slightly more insistent. Each time, another volunteer or coordinator mysteriously appears before things can escalate. As the evening winds down, I notice him standing near the back door, phone in hand, watching. Sarah approaches my station again. We've called the police, she whispers. Just to be safe, someone will escort you to your car when you're ready to leave. That's when he makes his final move. While most volunteers are busy cleaning up, he quickly approaches my table. Last chance to help, he says, his voice tight with barely contained frustration. My car's still out back. Don't make this difficult. Is there a problem here? A deep voice behind him makes him jump. Mike, one of our security volunteers who also happens to be a retired police officer, stands with his arms crossed. The man's face flushes red. Just trying to drop off some donations, he mutters, but his hands are empty. No boxes, no bags, nothing to suggest he ever had any donations to begin with. The event ended 10 minutes ago, Mike says calmly. We're not accepting any more donations tonight. I'll walk you out the front entrance. As Mike escorts him away, I notice 2 police officers entering through the main doors. Sarah appears at my side with my coat. Let's pack up your station, she says. You're done for the night. Later, in the parking lot, I learn that the man's car was indeed parked behind the building, facing the exit, engine running. The police run his information and discover he's been banned from charity events in neighboring towns for similar behavior. The next day, the community center implements new safety protocols for all volunteer events, buddy systems, designated donation areas only, and security cameras covering all entrances. They also start offering free personal safety workshops for volunteers. Sarah calls to check on me and tells me something that sends chills down my spine. After reviewing the security footage, they discovered he had arrived empty-handed. No donations, no boxes, nothing. He had spent the first 2 hours just watching the volunteers, particularly the ones working alone. When I returned to volunteer the following week, I noticed changes. Volunteers now wear numbered badges with photos. Security guards patrol regularly. Most importantly, there's a new sense of awareness among the volunteers. We watch out for each other, work in pairs, and trust our instincts when something feels wrong. During our pre-shift meeting, Sarah introduces a new policy. No volunteer is ever required to help someone one-on-one, especially outside the building. Your safety is more important than being polite, she tells the group. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The community's response is overwhelming. More volunteers sign up, particularly people with security or law enforcement backgrounds. Local businesses donate security cameras and lighting for the parking lot. Self-defense instructors offer free classes to volunteers. What could have been a story that scared people away from volunteering, instead brought our community closer together. We're more vigilant now, but also more connected. We look out for each other, speak up when something seems wrong, and make sure everyone gets home safely. Last week, a new volunteer hesitated when someone asked her to help carry boxes to their car. Without missing a beat, 3 other volunteers stepped forward to help, and as a group. The person asking for help smiled and thanked them all, understanding completely. That's the thing about predators. They count on people being too polite to say no, too worried about seeming rude to trust their instincts. But they don't expect communities to stand together, to choose safety over politeness, to watch out for each other. Now, when I look at the holiday lights reflecting off the snow, I see more than just festive decorations. I see our community's commitment to keeping each other safe, one small action at a time. Sometimes, the best gift we can give is the courage to say no, and the support to stand behind that decision. 911 dispatch. What's your emergency? My voice stays steady as I handle another crisis, guiding first responders to a house fire across town, 12 hours into my shift, and the calls keep coming. That's why I almost miss my gas light blinking on. Almost. Working dispatch teaches you to notice details. The shake in a caller's voice, the background sounds that tell a deeper story, the patterns that could mean the difference between life and not life. So when I pull into the Shell station just off Route 16, something feels off before I can even name why. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow across the empty parking lot. It's that dead time between late night and early morning when the world feels pause-buttoned. Only one other car sits at the pumps, a beaten-up Honda with a missing taillight. I'm sliding my credit card into the reader when I hear her voice. "Excuse me?" I turn to find a woman standing closer than expected, making me jump. She's probably in her 30s, wearing a wrinkled business suit that seems out of place at 3 a.m. Her mascara is smudged, and she's shivering despite the mild spring night. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she says, wringing her hands. "But my car broke down a few miles back, and my phone is dead. Could I possibly get a ride to the next town? My sister lives there." 8 years of dispatch work has taught me to read people, and something about her story doesn't add up. Her suit is wrinkled but clean, not what you'd expect from someone who's been walking along the highway. And though she claims to be stranded, I didn't see her walking when I drove up. "There's a phone inside the station," I tell her, gesturing to the lit storefront, where I can see the clerk watching us. "I'm sure they'd let you call your sister." Her expression shifts for just a moment, something darker flashing across her face before the desperate look returns. "Please," she says, taking a step closer. "I don't feel safe here alone. You look trustworthy, like someone who helps people." That's when I notice the Honda's reflection in my car window. Its passenger door is opening slowly, silently. "Actually," I say, keeping my voice casual as I remove the gas nozzle, "I can do better than a ride. I'm a 911 dispatcher. Let me call someone to help you." I reach for my work phone, the one with direct access to local patrol units. She moves with surprising speed, grabbing my arm. "No police," she snaps, all pretense of helplessness gone. Her fingernails dig into my skin as she tries to pull me toward the Honda. "Just get in the car. Don't make this difficult." Training kicks in. I wrench my arm free and slam my hand on my car's panic button. The alarm splits the night air as I back toward the station's entrance. The clerk is already on the phone, and I can see headlights approaching on the highway. A man erupts from the Honda's passenger side, cursing as he runs toward us. The woman lunges for me again, but I'm already through the station's door. The clerk, a retired security guard named Marcus, is coming around the counter with a baseball bat. "Police are 3 minutes out," he says calmly, positioning himself between me and the door. Outside, the woman and her companion are peeling out of the parking lot, leaving black tire marks on the asphalt. My hands shake as I pull out my work phone, calling in the Honda's description and direction of travel to my colleagues at dispatch. Within minutes, the station is filled with patrol cars, their lights painting the gas pumps in red and blue stripes. The investigation reveals a pattern of similar incidents at gas stations along Route 16. Women approached alone, asked for rides, then forced into waiting vehicles. Most escaped, but some weren't as fortunate. The detectives tell me my dispatcher instincts probably saved me from becoming another statistic. Marcus refuses to let me pay for my gas. "You did everything right," he says, walking me to my car after I give my statement. Most people would have tried to help without questioning it. Being kind doesn't mean ignoring your instincts. The next few weeks bring changes to the gas station. Marcus convinces the owner to install better lighting and more security cameras. They post signs warning customers about common scams and offering free emergency phone calls. The overnight shift now has 2 clerks instead of 1. I find myself stopping there more often, even when my tank isn't low. Sometimes I bring coffee for Marcus and his new coworker, Sarah. We trade stories about the weird things we've seen on night shift, but we also talk about safety measures, about watching out for each other. One night, I arrive to find Marcus teaching a young woman how to use her car keys as a defensive tool. Better to know and not need it, he tells her, than need it and not know. She's one of many. The gas station has become an unofficial safety hub for late-night travelers. They catch the couple eventually, 3 states over, trying the same scam at another gas station. The woman in the suit wasn't their first partner. They'd been manipulating vulnerable people into helping them target others, creating a chain of fear and exploitation. Now when I work dispatch and get calls about stranded motorists, I think about that night. We still send help, of course, but we also warn our officers about potential scams. Being cautious doesn't mean being callous. It means being smart about how we help. Last week, a rookie dispatcher asked me how I stay calm during crisis calls. I told her about the gas station, about how sometimes the scariest situations don't announce themselves with sirens and screams. They creep in with plausible stories and practiced desperation. Trust your training, I told her, but also trust that feeling in your gut when something seems wrong. In this job, those instincts aren't just about keeping yourself safe. They're about protecting others too. The gas station has become a sort of landmark for local law enforcement. Patrol cars regularly stop by, officers checking in with Marcus and Sarah. They've helped multiple people escape dangerous situations simply by being aware and unafraid to question things that don't add up. Sometimes I look back at that night and think about how differently it could have ended. But mostly, I think about the community that grew from it, the network of people watching out for each other, sharing information, refusing to let fear win over compassion. Because that's the real lesson I learned. True kindness isn't about ignoring danger signs or sacrificing safety. It's about building safer spaces where we can help each other without becoming vulnerable. It's about creating light in those dark hours when the world feels pause-buttoned and making sure nobody has to face that darkness alone. The lighter flickers 3 times before finally catching, its small flame barely visible in the twilight. Jake and I have been coming to this field behind the old Thompson farm to smoke for months. It's our secret spot, far enough from the road to be private but close enough to civilization that it feels safe. At least, it did until tonight. Dude, do you feel that? Jake's voice carries an edge I've never heard before. We're sitting on our usual fallen log, the evening breeze carrying the sweet scent of hay from nearby fields. But something's different. The air feels heavier, charged with a strange electricity that makes my skin prickle. Feel what? I ask. But even as the words leave my mouth, I know exactly what he means. It's like being watched. That crawling sensation between your shoulder blades when someone's eyes are boring into your back. I turn slowly, scanning the tree line that borders the field. That's when I see it. A figure standing perfectly still among the shadows of the oak trees, just visible enough to make out its human shape, but too far away to distinguish any features. At first, I think it might be a trick of the fading light, one of those weird shadows that look like people until your eyes adjust. There's someone there, Jake whispers, his shoulder pressing against mine as he tenses. Right by that big oak tree. The figure hasn't moved, hasn't made a sound, just stands there watching us from about 50 yards away. I raise my hand in a tentative wave, trying to convince myself it's probably just a farmer checking their property. Hello? My voice sounds small in the vast openness of the field. No response, no movement, just that silent, steady staring. Jake starts gathering our things, shoving them into his backpack with shaking hands. We should go, he says, trying to keep his voice steady. It's getting dark anyway. That's when the figure takes its first step forward. Not a casual step, not the way someone walks when they're just passing by. It's deliberate, purposeful, headed straight for us, still completely silent. My heart hammers against my ribs as we both stand up, backing away slowly. The figure keeps coming, maintaining that same measured pace. As it gets closer, details become clearer. Tall, wearing dark clothes, face hidden in the shadow of what looks like a hood. Maybe they're just trying to tell us we're trespassing, I suggest weakly, but Jake grabs my arm, pulling me back faster. The figure's pace increases to match ours, still heading directly toward us with that unnatural silence. We turn and walk quickly toward the road, trying not to run, trying not to show fear. But I can hear footsteps now, heavy boots on dry grass getting closer. I risk a glance over my shoulder and instantly regret it. The figure is only 30 yards behind us now, and its walk has become more aggressive, more predatory. Jake stumbles on a hidden root, catching himself before he falls. The sound of his shuffling feet seems impossibly loud in the growing darkness. The footsteps behind us quicken. 20 yards now. Still no words, no demands, no explanation. Just that relentless pursuit. "Run," Jake whispers, and we do. We sprint across the field toward the gap in the fence where we always enter, our feet pounding against the packed earth. The footsteps behind us break into a run too, faster than seems possible, closing the distance with inhuman speed. I can hear breathing now, not ours, but heavy, rhythmic breathing getting closer and closer. The fence is still 50 yards away. We're not going to make it. My lungs are burning, and Jake is starting to fall behind. That's when headlights sweep across the field, a car passing on the road ahead. I've never been so grateful for traffic in my life. "Help!" I scream, waving my arms wildly. "Somebody help us!" The car slows, then stops. 2 more sets of headlights appear, illuminating the field like a football stadium. Behind us, the footsteps suddenly stop. I turn around, half expecting to see our pursuer right on top of us, but the field is empty. The figure has vanished as completely as if it had never been there. Mr. Peterson from the hardware store jumps out of his truck, followed by the Wilsons from the farm next door. "You boys okay?" he calls out, jogging toward us. Heard yelling. We try to explain between gasping breaths. The figure, the chase, the unnatural silence. They search the field with flashlights but find nothing. No footprints except ours, no sign anyone else was ever there. The police come, take statements, search the area more thoroughly. They find evidence that other people have been using the field, cigarette butts that aren't ours, empty beer cans, a makeshift campsite hidden in the trees. It turns out we weren't the only ones who thought this was a good hidden spot. That night, unable to sleep, I researched the Thompson property's history. No dramatic stories, no tragic incidents, nothing to explain what we experienced. Just generations of farmers working their land until the last Thompson moved to Florida 3 years ago. The field gets a lot more attention after that night. The town installs security cameras and better lighting. The police increase their patrols. Local parents use our story to warn their kids about being careful in isolated places, even ones that seem safe. Jake and I find a new spot to hang out, the well-lit picnic area behind the community center. Sometimes we talk about that night, trying to make sense of what happened. Was it someone trying to scare us? A transient passing through? Something else entirely? Last week, I drove past the field at sunset. For a moment, I thought I saw a tall figure standing by the oak trees. But when I looked again, it was just a shadow, just the play of light through branches. Still, I don't slow down, and I don't look back. The experience changed us, but not in the way you might expect. We're more cautious now, more aware of our surroundings. We don't take safety for granted just because a place is familiar. But we also learned something about friendship, about standing together when things get scary, about not leaving anyone behind. Sometimes, late at night, I still feel that sensation of being watched, but now I know what to do with it. I check my surroundings. I stay aware. I trust my instincts. Most importantly, I remember that it's okay to run. It's okay to call for help. It's okay to admit when a situation feels wrong. The field is different now, lit up, monitored, safe. Local kids play soccer there on summer evenings while their parents watch from new benches. What was once a hidden spot for teenage mischief has become a community space, transformed by the simple act of bringing things out of the shadows. But sometimes, when the evening light hits the oak trees just right, I swear I can see a tall figure standing perfectly still, watching, waiting. That's usually when I decide it's time to head home, while the sun is still up, while other people are around. Some things, I've learned, are better left in the darkness where they belong. The campus coffee shop closes at exactly 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes before my last class ends. I can see the baristas wiping down counters through the library windows as Professor Martinez wraps up his lecture on cognitive psychology. Another night of facing the walk home without my usual caffeine shield. The benefit of taking night classes is smaller class sizes and better parking. The downside, everything else, especially in late autumn, when darkness settles over the city like a heavy blanket by 6 p.m. The trek from campus to my apartment isn't long. 20 minutes if I take the main roads, 15 if I cut through the residential areas. Tonight, something makes me hesitate at the building exit. Maybe it's the unusual stillness of the air, or the way the streetlights seem dimmer than usual. My classmates disperse quickly, most heading for the parking garage while I adjust my backpack straps and start my familiar walk. The first 10 minutes are fine. Normal. The same route I've taken 3 nights a week for the entire semester. Past the chemistry building, around the student center, through the campus gates. The coffee shop's darkened windows reflect my solitary figure as I pass. I'm about to turn onto Cedar Street, my usual shortcut, when movement catches my eye. 2 men walking on the opposite side of the street, maybe 30 feet back. Something about their pace makes me pause. They're walking too slowly for this time of night, too deliberately. I keep going, but my steps quicken slightly. The sound of their footsteps echoes mine, their pace increasing to match. My heart rate picks up as I realize they're crossing the street, heading my way. Don't panic, I tell myself. You're being paranoid. They probably live in one of these houses. But when I glance back, they're closer now, moving with purpose. One is tall and thin, the other shorter but muscular. Both wearing dark clothes, faces hidden in the shadows of hooded sweatshirts. I pull out my phone, pretending to take a call. Hey, yeah, I'm almost there, I say to no one, voice steady despite my racing pulse. 5 minutes max. You're still outside waiting, right? They don't slow down. If anything, they move faster. My mind races through options. Cedar Street is the quickest route home, but it's poorly lit and lined with student rentals, most dark and empty during break. The main road would add 10 minutes to my walk, but a car passes, its headlights briefly illuminating the men's faces. They're focused entirely on me, not talking to each other, not looking around like normal pedestrians would, just watching, following, getting closer with each step. I make my decision in a split second. Instead of turning onto Cedar, I keep walking straight toward the brightly lit intersection ahead. Behind me, I hear one of them swear quietly. They're not even trying to be subtle now. Their footsteps quicken to an almost run. My fingers shake as I pull up my mapping app, looking for alternate routes. That's when I remember Mrs. Rodriguez telling me about the network of connected alleyways behind her house. She uses them to walk her dogs, saying they create shortcuts all through the old neighborhood. I spot the first alley entrance just ahead, between a coffee shop and a bookstore. Both closed now, but their security lights illuminate the narrow passage. Without hesitation, I turn into it, my walk breaking into a steady jog. The alley opens into a small courtyard, then splits into 3 directions. I take the right fork, then another right, then left. Behind me, I hear the men's footsteps echoing off the brick walls, but they sound confused and uncertain. They didn't expect this. I recognize Mrs. Rodriguez's garden wall ahead, the one covered in climbing roses. Another left here, then straight through to Maple Avenue. My lungs burn as I run, but adrenaline keeps me moving. The footsteps behind me are getting fainter, more distant. A motion sensor light flicks on as I pass another house, momentarily blinding me. When my eyes adjust, I spot the entrance to Maple, just 50 feet ahead. Beyond it, I can see cars passing, people walking, the comforting bustle of the main street. I burst out of the alley onto Maple Avenue, nearly colliding with a group of students heading to the late-night diner. They steady me, asking if I'm okay. When I tell them I'm being followed, they immediately form a group around me, walking me to the diner while one calls campus security. Inside the bright diner, surrounded by the smell of coffee and the chatter of late-night customers, my hands finally stop shaking. The campus security officers arrive quickly, taking my statement and escorting me home. They find no sign of the men in the alleys, but they increase patrols in the area. The next day, I map out every possible route between campus and my apartment. I mark the well-lit streets, the busy areas, the security camera locations. Most importantly, I chart the alley network, taking photos of each entrance and exit. Knowledge becomes my armor. Mrs. Rodriguez, hearing about what happened, organizes a neighborhood meeting. Together, the residents install more motion sensor lights in the alleys. They create a phone tree for students who walk home late. Some offer their porches as safe spaces, marked with small green lights that mean help available here. My classmates step up too. We form walking groups, coordinate our schedules, share our locations with each other. Professor Martinez starts ending class 5 minutes early so we can leave together while the coffee shop is still open. The incident leads to changes on campus as well. The university extends the campus shuttle service hours and adds new stops in the residential areas. They install emergency call boxes along popular walking routes and create a safety escort program for night students. But the biggest change is in me. I still take night classes, still walk the same streets, but now I walk differently, aware, prepared, confident in knowing my escape routes. I carry a personal alarm and take self-defense classes at the student center. Fear doesn't control me, it informs me. Last week, a new student in my psychology class asked about walking home alone at night. Instead of scaring her with my story, I showed her my map of safe routes. I introduced her to the walking group and Mrs. Rodriguez's network of green porch lights. I taught her about the alleyways, not as places to fear, but as paths to safety when used wisely. Because that's what I learned that night. Safety isn't just about avoiding danger. It's about knowing your environment, trusting your instincts, and building connections with your community. Sometimes the scariest moments lead to the strongest bonds, turning dark alleys into paths of light, and strangers into guardians. The first time is nothing special. Tuesday morning at the boutique where I work, helping customers find the perfect accessories for their outfits. He's middle-aged, wearing a polo shirt and khakis, the kind of guy you'd pass on the street without a second glance. He asks about my car, a red Mazda parked out front. Something about the transmission model. I answer politely but vaguely. 3 days later, he appears at the cafe where I'm having lunch with my sister, 15 miles from the boutique. Same polo shirt, same questions about my car. My sister notices my discomfort, the way my soup suddenly tastes like cardboard. "Do you know him?" she whispers as he leaves. I shake my head, but a knot forms in my stomach. Over the next 2 weeks, he shows up everywhere. Outside my gym, at the grocery store, in the parking lot of the movie theater where I'm meeting friends. Always with car questions, always standing slightly too close, always watching me long after our interactions end. Each time, his presence feels less like coincidence and more like calculation. Maybe he's just really interested in Mazdas, my coworker suggests when I tell her about it. But she starts walking me to my car after closing, and I notice her taking photos of his license plate when he appears in our parking lot again. The questions change gradually. Now he wants to know my mechanic's name, where I get my oil changed, what routes I take to work. Each inquiry feels like he's building a map of my life, plotting points on a chart of my daily movements. When I give fake answers, he smiles like he knows I'm lying. I start varying my routine. Different roads to work, new grocery stores, random lunch spots. But somehow, he finds me. At a bookstore I've never visited before, there he is, asking about my car's fuel efficiency. At a garden center 30 miles from home, he appears between the rose bushes, wondering about my preferred brand of tires. The police take a report but say they can't do much. He hasn't threatened me, hasn't explicitly broken any laws. They suggest documenting everything, changing my habits, staying aware. I download a personal safety app and share my location with family and friends. My sister helps me set up security cameras at my apartment. My co-workers create a buddy system for breaks and closing shifts. Friends start checking in regularly, making sure I'm never alone for too long. But still, he appears, his questions becoming more insistent, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. One evening, I'm working late at the boutique, doing inventory before a big sale. Through the window, I see him sitting in his car across the street. He's been there for hours, just watching. My coworker's car is parked next to mine, but she left an hour ago, carpooling with her boyfriend. As I lock up, he steps out of his car. "Beautiful night," he calls out, walking toward me. Perfect weather for a drive. How's that transmission holding up? My hands shake as I fumble with my keys, but I force my voice to stay steady. "I'm meeting my brother here." I lie. "He's a police officer. Should be here any minute." He hesitates for a moment, then smiles that empty smile. "Just trying to be friendly," he says, but there's an edge to his voice now. "You know, I've been having trouble with my own transmission. Maybe we could compare notes." Just then, headlights sweep across the parking lot. My coworker's boyfriend hasn't left after all. He was waiting around the corner, watching. He pulls up beside me, engine running. "Everything okay here?" The man backs away slowly, hands raised in mock surrender. "Just talking cars," he says, but his eyes stay fixed on me with an intensity that makes my skin crawl. He returns to his vehicle and drives away, but I know this isn't over. The next day, I file for a restraining order. The stack of documentation I've collected, photos, dates, locations, witness statements, speaks volumes. The judge grants the order, but paper doesn't stop people. It just gives consequences to their actions. Word spreads through the local business community. Store owners and employees keep an eye out for him, share information, warn each other. The boutique installs better security cameras. The cafe puts up signs about customer safety and trains staff to recognize stalking behavior. I take a self-defense class at the community center, learning not just physical techniques but psychological strategies. The instructor teaches us about maintaining boundaries, trusting instincts, using our voices. Politeness is not more important than safety, she reminds us. My sister suggests selling my car, but I refuse. If I change my whole life, he wins, I tell her. Instead, I have it checked for tracking devices and get the windows tinted. I install a dash cam that records front and back. Small changes that help me feel more in control. The restraining order works, mostly. He stops approaching me directly, but I still catch glimpses of him, watching from a distance, taking notes, always focused on my car. The police can't prove he's following me, but they increase patrols in areas I frequent. Other women start sharing similar stories, not just about him, but about others who push boundaries, who turn simple questions into weapons, who use common interests as excuses for harassment. We create a network, sharing information and supporting each other. The boutique starts hosting monthly safety workshops. What began as a response to one person's threatening behavior becomes a community resource. Women learn about personal security, setting boundaries, recognizing red flags, but they also learn about solidarity, about standing together. Last week, a teenage girl came into the store, visibly nervous. She told me about a man asking questions about her car at her after-school job. Without hesitation, I connected her with our network of supporters, police contacts, self-defense instructors, community advocates. Sometimes I still see him around town, but now I'm not alone. I have a community watching out for me, ready to respond. His power diminishes with every person who knows his tactics, every business that refuses to tolerate his behavior, every woman who learns to trust her instincts. My car has become a symbol of resistance rather than fear. I keep it clean and well-maintained, a daily reminder that I won't be driven away by intimidation. The questions that once felt like threats now feel like failed attempts to control someone who refused to be controlled. In the end, that's what he never understood. Cars were just his excuse, his way of seeming harmless while gathering information. But he taught me and others something valuable. There's no such thing as just questions when they're used to map out your vulnerabilities. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never underestimate the power of a community standing together. I love your shoes. Where did you get them? The voice catches us off guard. Friendly, enthusiastic, completely normal. Rachel and I pause our conversation about midterms to find a young man smiling at us from the bus stop bench. It's not even dark yet, the autumn sun still painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Thanks, Rachel says automatically, that ingrained politeness taking over before our brains can process the situation. We're only 6 blocks from home, taking our usual route back from the library. The street is quiet but not empty. A few cars pass by. Someone walks their dog across the road. The man stands up, still smiling. He looks ordinary enough. Jeans, sweatshirt, maybe a few years older than us. But something about the way he moves makes my skin prickle. I'm Jake, he says, falling into step beside us. You girls go to state. Rachel's hand finds mine, squeezing slightly. We've been best friends long enough to read each other's signals. Something feels off. His questions are too eager, his stride matching ours too perfectly. When we don't answer, his smile tightens at the corners. Come on, don't be like that, he says, moving closer. I'm just trying to be friendly. You seem like nice girls. The way he says nice girls makes my stomach turn. We walk faster, but he keeps pace easily. Where are you headed? Maybe I could walk with you. We're meeting friends, I lie, voice steady despite my racing heart. They're expecting us. But he's not listening anymore. His eyes have taken on a predatory gleam, all pretense of friendliness gone. You think you're too good to talk to me? His voice rises, echoing off the brick buildings. I'm a nice guy. You should be flattered I'm paying attention to you. He moves in front of us, blocking our path, forcing us to stop. Rachel tugs my arm, pulling me across the street. We don't run. Running feels like it would trigger something worse, but our quick walk has become a near jog, our casual chat replaced by tense silence. He follows, of course. Each time we cross a street, he crosses too. Each time we turn a corner, he's right behind us. His comments become more aggressive, more explicit. Other pedestrians glance our way but keep walking. Classic bystander effect. Everyone assumes someone else will help. Just stop for a minute, he shouts, close enough now that I can smell his cologne. I'll show you what a nice guy I can be. His footsteps speed up. Rachel's grip on my hand tightens painfully. We're still 4 blocks from home, but Sal's corner store is just ahead. The owner, Mrs. Chen, knows us. We stop there almost every day. Through the window, I can see her stocking shelves, her teenage son, Jimmy, doing homework at the counter. Without discussion, Rachel and I make a sharp turn into the store. The bell above the door chimes cheerfully, absurdly normal in contrast to our pounding hearts. Mrs. Chen, my voice comes out higher than intended. Can we use your phone? She takes one look at our faces and understands immediately. Jimmy, lock the door, she says calmly, already reaching for the phone. Outside, our follower paces back and forth, looking uncertain for the first time. Mrs. Chen speaks rapid-fire Mandarin to Jimmy, who disappears into the back room. When he returns, He's carrying his baseball bat. Our stalker sees it through the window and finally backs away, shooting us one last venomous look before walking quickly down the street. Police are coming, Mrs. Chen tells us, putting an arm around each of our shoulders. You'll stay here until they arrive. She sits us behind the counter, brings us water, keeps Jimmy posted at the door with his bat. When the police arrive, they take our statements and check the security cameras. They recognize him, he's done this before, escalating each time. Thanks to the footage and our descriptions, they finally have enough to make an arrest. The incident changes our daily routines, but not in the way you might expect. Mrs. Chen installs better security cameras and a panic button. She puts up signs declaring her store a safe haven for anyone being followed or harassed. Other businesses in the neighborhood follow suit. Rachel and I still walk home from the library, but now we have a safety network. Mrs. Chen, Jimmy, and other shop owners keep watch. We've downloaded personal safety apps and learned self-defense. Most importantly, we've learned to trust our instincts about friendly strangers. The local police start a community outreach program, teaching people how to recognize and respond to harassment. They emphasize that bystanders can help simply by being present, calling for assistance, or offering a safe place to wait. Our university newspaper runs a story about the incident, not to spread fear, but to highlight the importance of community response. The article includes a list of safe havens, businesses that have committed to helping people in dangerous situations. Last week, I was working at the campus coffee shop when two freshman girls came running in, clearly frightened. Without hesitation, my manager locked the door and called security. The girls told us about a man who wouldn't stop following them, asking personal questions, getting angry when they wouldn't respond. As I made them hot chocolate and waited with them for security to arrive, I shared our story, not to scare them, but to show them they weren't alone, that the community would stand with them. You did the right thing, I told them. You trusted your instincts and found help. The experience taught us something valuable about the difference between friendliness and predatory behavior. Real friendly people don't get angry when you don't want to talk. They don't follow you down the street. Don't try to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. Now, when I hear someone say, "I'm just being friendly," or "you should be flattered," while making others uncomfortable, I speak up. Those phrases are weapons used to make targets doubt their instincts, to make them feel obligated to engage with someone who means them harm. Rachel and I still pass that bus stop every day. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have gone if Mrs. Chen's store hadn't been there, if we hadn't recognized the danger signals early enough. But mostly, I think about how one frightening experience led to positive changes in our community. Because that's the real story here. Not about fear or harassment, but about people coming together to protect each other. About turning, "I'm just being friendly," from a threat into a true statement, backed by actions and respect. About creating spaces where safety isn't just a word, but a promise kept by an entire community. "10 minutes. That's all I need after my shift at the cafe. Just 10 minutes of sitting in my car, scrolling through social media, decompressing from a day of demanding customers and complicated coffee orders. It's my little ritual, my moment of peace before heading inside to face my pile of homework." The parking spot in front of our house is perfect, close enough to see our porch light, far enough from the street lamp to feel private. My mom thinks it's weird that I don't come straight inside, but she doesn't understand how these few minutes of solitude help reset my brain. Tonight's different, though. I can't explain why at first. The autumn air feels heavier somehow, pressing against my car windows like a physical presence. My phone screen reflects something in the darkness behind me, a shadow that shouldn't be there, moving just at the edge of my vision. I turn around quickly, but there's nothing there. Just the usual view of our quiet suburban street, empty except for Mrs. Peterson walking her Yorkshire Terrier. She waves as she passes, and I wave back, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Back to my phone. back to mindlessly scrolling through TikTok. But now I'm hyper-aware of every sound, the tick of my cooling engine, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, a cat knocking over someone's trash can down the street. The shadows in my rearview mirror seem darker than usual. Movement catches my eye again, this time more distinct. A reflection in my side mirror, someone ducking down behind my car. My heart leaps into my throat as I fumble with my keys, ready to make a dash for the house. But before I can move, our front door flies open. Mom bursts out onto the porch, waving her arms frantically. "Emma, come inside right now." Her voice carries a note of panic I've never heard before. I don't hesitate. I grab my bag and run, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. Inside, Mom locks the door with shaking hands. "Someone was watching you," she says, pulling me into a tight hug. "I went to get the mail and saw him, crouched by your window looking in. He had his phone out, like he was recording." My legs go weak as the implications sink in. How long had he been there? How many other nights had I sat oblivious while someone watched? The police arrive within minutes of Mom's call, but they find only footprints in the soft earth beside my car, and something else that makes my blood run cold. Handprints and face prints on my window, visible in the officers' flashlight beams. Smudges in the condensation that had built up on the glass. Physical proof that someone had been pressing against my window, watching me during what I thought was my private time. The next day, Dad installs motion sensor lights around the house. Mom buys security cameras that send alerts to our phones. My brother helps me tint my car windows. Now I can see out, but no one can see in. Small changes that help restore some sense of security. But the incident affects our whole neighborhood. Mrs. Peterson creates a community watch group. Neighbors share security camera footage, coordinate walking schedules, keep track of unfamiliar vehicles. The police increase their patrols during shift change hours when people are coming home from work. My cafe manager rearranges the schedule so no one leaves alone after closing. We install better lighting in the parking lot and security cameras that cover every angle. Regular customers start walking employees to their cars, creating an informal protection network. I still take my decompression time after work, but differently now. I sit in the cafe's break room, or on our well-lit porch, or in our living room with the curtains drawn. Mom joins me sometimes, not hovering, just being present. Those quiet moments feel sacred now, not because they're solitary, but because they're safe. The police never find the person who was watching me, but they discover similar incidents reported across town. Young people followed to their cars, mysterious figures photographing through windows, handprints found on glass in the morning. Each report adds to a pattern of predatory behavior. Our neighborhood responds not with fear, but with determination. We organize self-defense classes at the community center. Local businesses designate safe spaces where people can wait if they feel unsafe. Teenagers learn about personal security and the importance of trusting their instincts. One morning, I find chalk messages on the sidewalk outside our house. "You are not alone," and "We watch out for each other." The whole street is covered in similar messages, a colorful reminder that our community stands together. Mrs. Peterson later admits she organized the middle school art club to do it. The experience changes how I see private moments. They're still important, still necessary for maintaining sanity in a busy world. But now I understand that true privacy isn't about isolation. It's about having safe spaces where you can let your guard down, supported by people who care about your well-being. Last week, I noticed a young girl sitting in her car after school, scrolling on her phone. I recognized myself in her, that need for a moment of peace. Instead of just walking by, I stopped at a safe distance and waited until she noticed me. We ended up talking about the importance of being aware of your surroundings while still taking care of your mental health. Now my car windows show different kinds of prints: student artwork from the cafe's weekly children's events, positive messages written in washable marker-y, reminders that this space is watched and protected by the community. What was once a vulnerability has become a canvas for resilience. Sometimes, late at night, I still check my rearview mirror more often than necessary. I still startle at unexpected movements in the darkness, but these reactions don't control me. They remind me to stay aware, to trust my instincts, to maintain the boundaries that keep me safe. Because that's what I learned from that night. Privacy isn't a guarantee. It's something we create together, through community awareness, through supporting each other, through turning moments of fear into opportunities for connection. My 10 minutes of peace now mean more than ever, not because they're solitary, but because they're protected by a network of people who understand their importance. Highway 16 stretches endlessly through darkened pine forests, my headlights carving a tunnel through the night. I'm 3 hours into a 5-hour drive home from my cousin's wedding when I spot the truck ahead, an old pickup parked half on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly in the darkness. My first instinct is to slow down and check if they need help. It's what anyone would do on a remote stretch of road like this. But as I ease off the gas, something catches my eye. Several large dogs running loose around the vehicle, their shapes barely visible in my approaching headlights. The truck's doors stand wide open, but I can't see anyone around it. Just the dogs, moving in strange patterns that don't quite make sense. They're not playing or exploring like normal dogs would. They're pacing, almost guarding. I tap my brakes, reducing speed but maintaining enough momentum to pass by quickly if needed. That's when my headlights sweep across something that makes my heart skip. A shadow moving behind the truck. Distinctly human, but trying to stay hidden. Not seeking help, but waiting. The dogs notice my approaching car. Their heads turn in unison, and the pacing stops. In my headlights, I can see their stance change from restless to alert. These aren't lost pets or friendly strays. They're trained, and they're waiting for commands. My hands tighten on the steering wheel as I make a split-second decision. Instead of slowing further, I press the gas pedal. The dogs start moving toward the road, but I'm already accelerating past them. In my rearview mirror, I see the shadow behind the truck step forward, raising something in their hand, maybe just waving, maybe not. The truck disappears into darkness behind me, but my heart continues racing. I grab my phone from the passenger seat, ready to call 911 only to find no signal. Of course, this stretch of highway is notorious for dead zones. I'll have to wait until the next town to report what I saw. 20 minutes later, I pull into a well-lit gas station in Miller's Creek. My hands are still shaking as I dial 911. The dispatcher takes my report seriously, especially when I mention the dogs. Apparently, I'm not the first person to call about suspicious activity involving trained dogs along that highway. While the police head out to investigate, the gas station attendant, an older woman named Ruth, brings me a cup of coffee. "You did the right thing," she tells me, her face grim. "We've had several incidents lately. People stopped to help what looked like broken-down vehicles, only to find themselves in dangerous situations." She explains that local authorities have been tracking a pattern: strategically placed vehicles with open doors, trained dogs used for intimidation, hidden people waiting to ambush Good Samaritans. No one has been seriously hurt yet, but several people have reported close calls. "The dogs are the new trick," Ruth says, refilling my coffee. "Makes people hesitate just long enough to get a good look at their vehicle, see if they're traveling alone. They're counting on that moment of concern for abandoned animals." The police call back while I'm still at the gas station. The truck was gone when they arrived, but they found evidence that multiple vehicles had pulled over in that spot recently. They take my description and add it to their growing file of similar reports. Ruth refuses to let me pay for my coffee. Instead, she gives me a card with safety tips for solo drivers, created by the local sheriff's department. "Never stop for broken-down vehicles after dark," she reads aloud. "Call emergency services from a safe location. Trust your instincts." Before I leave, Ruth makes sure I have a full tank of gas and programs her station's number into my phone. "We're here 24/7, she says. If anyone needs help, they can call us. We'll contact the proper authorities or send our certified towing service." The rest of my drive home feels different. I'm more alert, more aware of my surroundings. Every stopped vehicle makes me think twice. But now I know what to do. Note the location, keep driving to a safe place, report anything suspicious. The next day, I research roadside safety and learn about emerging scam patterns. I join online communities where travelers share information about suspicious activities along highways. The dog tactic, it turns out, is being reported more frequently, playing on people's natural instinct to help stranded animals. Local news picks up the story, not to spread fear, but to raise awareness. They interview Ruth, who has become something of a guardian angel for highway travelers. Her gas station is now an official safe haven, one of many businesses along Highway 16 that have joined a safety network. The Highway Patrol increases their presence in the area. They work with local animal control to investigate reports of dogs being used suspiciously. Signs appear along the highway, report suspicious activity, and do not stop for stranded vehicles. Call emergency services. A month later, I'm driving the same route. This time, I notice new emergency call boxes installed at regular intervals. Ruth's gas station has a fresh coat of paint and a large sign declaring it a safe stop location. The highway feels less isolated somehow, more watched over. I stop to thank Ruth and find her teaching a young driver about highway safety. Know the safe spots, she's saying, pointing to a map marked with verified help locations. Know who to call, and always, always trust your gut. The experience changed how I think about helping others, not by making me less compassionate, but by teaching me safer ways to offer assistance. Now I keep an emergency services app on my phone. I know the locations of safe havens along my regular routes. I've learned that real help sometimes means not stopping, but reporting suspicious situations to authorities who can respond safely. Last week, I saw a car with a flat tire near my exit. Instead of stopping, I called the highway patrol from a safe location. They sent their own roadside assistance team, trained professionals who know how to handle potentially dangerous situations. Sometimes I think about those dogs, about how close I came to stopping that night. But mostly, I think about Ruth and others like her, creating networks of safety along dark highways. Because that's the real story here. Not about danger, but about communities coming together to protect travelers, one well-lit gas station at a time. Maple leaves crunch under my feet as I walk the familiar path home, their autumn colors muted in the fading twilight. The streetlights are just starting to flicker on, casting long shadows across suburban sidewalks I've known since childhood. My phone died an hour ago. Third time this week I've forgotten to charge it at work. But I'm not worried. It's only 8 blocks from the bookstore to my house. The first car passes slowly, unremarkable except for how it lingers just a bit too long beside me. I barely notice, too busy mentally cataloging the books I need to order for next week's display. When it passes again 2 minutes later, moving even slower, my step falters slightly. By the third pass, my heart is keeping time with my footsteps. Each time the car appears, it drives a little slower, each circuit bringing it closer to the curb where I walk. It's an older sedan, dark-colored, its engine purring quietly in the evening air. The windows are tinted just enough that I can't see the driver clearly. I pick up my pace, wishing I'd taken Mom's offer to pick me up after work. "You shouldn't walk alone after dark," she always says. But I'm 23, and this neighborhood hasn't changed since I was in kindergarten, except right now, it feels completely foreign. The car pulls ahead and stops at the corner, its brake lights glowing like red eyes in the gathering darkness. My steps slow as I approach. I'll have to walk past it to continue home. The driver's window starts to lower with a soft electric whir. Without hesitation, I turn down Oak Street instead of continuing straight. It's the longer route home, but more houses are lit up on this block. Someone's walking their dog ahead, and I can hear children playing in a backyard nearby. Normal evening sounds that help steady my nerves. The car's engine revs to life behind me. I don't need to look back to know it's turning onto Oak Street too. My walking pace is almost a jog now, but I'm trying to appear casual, trying not to show fear. The car crawls along beside me, close enough that I could reach out and touch it. "Hey there." The voice from the lowered window is friendly, conversational. "Looks like you could use a ride." It's getting dark. I keep walking, eyes forward, hands clenched into fists in my jacket pockets. The voice turns harder. "I'm just trying to be nice. Don't be rude." Mrs. Davis's house is coming up on the right. She always sits on her porch in the evenings, watching the neighborhood with sharp eyes behind her gardening hat. But tonight her porch is empty, her lights off. The children's voices have faded, and the dog walker has turned onto another street. The car pulls ahead of me again, stopping at a slight angle that would force me to walk into the street to get around it. The passenger door opens slowly, and panic floods my system. I turn abruptly, ready to run, but now there's a second car behind me. Had it been there all along? That's when I see the salvation of green Christmas lights glowing softly on the Wilsons' porch. The safe space owned sign in their window, part of our neighborhood watch program. Without hesitation, I sprint up their front walk and pound on their door. Mr. Wilson opens it immediately. He's been watching through the window, phone already in hand. "Get inside," he says firmly, stepping onto his porch. His voice carries down the street as he speaks into his phone. "Yes, 2 suspicious vehicles on Oak Street." The cars disappear quickly, engines roaring in the quiet neighborhood. Mrs. Wilson wraps me in a blanket despite the mild evening, pressing hot chocolate into my shaking hands. Their teenage daughter Sophie sits with me while we wait for the police, distracting me with stories about her latest art project. When my parents arrive, Mom doesn't say, "I told you so." She just hugs me tight while Dad talks to the officers. They take descriptions of the vehicles, add them to a growing list of similar incidents in the area. The driver's tactics are familiar: isolate, intimidate, pretend to be helpful. The next day, our neighborhood launches a new safety initiative. More houses add green lights to their porches, identifying safe spaces for people in danger. The bookstore adjusts its schedule so no one works alone after sunset. A walking buddy system forms naturally, with neighbors coordinating their routines. I start teaching a self-defense class at the community center, turning my fear into action. We focus not just on physical techniques, but on awareness, on trusting instincts, on using technology and community resources for safety. The class fills up immediately, then adds second and third sessions. The police increase their presence, but more importantly, they help us create a neighborhood watch app. It allows users to track suspicious vehicles, share safe routes, and quickly alert others to potential dangers. The app connects to local businesses, security cameras, creating a virtual safety net. Sophie Wilson starts an art project at her high school, painting murals about community safety and support. The images appear around town, on business walls, in school hallways, at bus stops. Each one includes information about safe spaces and emergency contacts. A month later, I'm walking home from work again, but everything's different. My phone is charged, tracking my location. I've taken a self-defense course. I know which houses are safe spaces, which businesses stay open late, which neighbors are usually home. More importantly, I'm not alone. Sarah from the coffee shop walks with me 3 days a week. The Hendersons keep an eye out from their front porch. Mrs. Davis is back to her evening watch, now with a clear purpose. Even the local dog walkers have organized their routes to provide a constant presence on the streets. Last week, a college student ran into the bookstore, clearly frightened. Without hesitation, our staff implemented our safety protocol, locked the doors, called the police, provided a safe place to wait. The suspicious car circling our block drove away when patrol cars arrived. The experience changed our community, but not in the way you might expect. Instead of becoming fearful, we became more connected. Green porch lights spread beyond our neighborhood, creating a network of safe spaces across town. What started as a response to danger became a movement of support and protection. Now when I walk home in the evening, I still hear autumn leaves crunching under my feet, but I also hear neighbors calling greetings, see families on their porches, notice the green lights glowing steadily in the gathering darkness. What once felt like vulnerability has become a reminder of strength, not just mine, but our entire community's. Because that's what those cars didn't expect. A neighborhood that refuses to let fear win, that transforms threats into opportunities for connection. Every green light represents a promise. You are not alone. You will find help here. We stand together against those who would make us afraid. Your card's maxed out again, isn't it? Mia teases as I dig through my wallet. We're standing at the ATM outside Franklin Bank, the last stop before pizza night at Marco's. The street is quiet for a Friday evening. Most businesses already closed except for the 24-hour pharmacy across the intersection. Some of us don't have unlimited parental credit cards. I shoot back, finally finding my debit card. The ATM screen glows blue in the dusk, a familiar beacon I've visited at least twice a week since starting college. Mia leans against the wall, scrolling through TikTok while I type in my PIN. That's when we hear it, mumbling, growing steadily louder as it approaches. A woman in a stained dress shuffles into view, talking animatedly to someone who isn't there. Her movements are jerky, unpredictable, like a puppet with tangled strings. Just ignore her, Mia whispers, moving closer to me. Let's hurry up and go. But the woman has already spotted us. She changes direction abruptly, heading straight for the ATM alcove, her one-sided conversation becoming more agitated. My fingers shake slightly as I try to navigate the withdrawal screen. The woman is close enough now that I can hear what she's saying. They're watching us, always watching, through the machines, through the money. They know everything. She stops directly behind us, swaying slightly. I can feel Mia tensing beside me, both of us trying to project calm while alarm bells ring in our heads. The woman's reflection appears in the ATM screen, her eyes wild and unfocused. "You're one of them, aren't you?" She suddenly shrieks, grabbing Mia's arm. Using their machines, spreading their signals. Mia yanks her arm free, but the woman follows as we back away from the ATM, my transaction forgotten. "We don't want any trouble," I say firmly, positioning myself between Mia and the woman. "We're just leaving." But she's not listening anymore. She reaches into her dress pocket, pulling out something that glints in the streetlight. It's just a handful of coins, but the way she clutches them like weapons makes my heart race. She starts throwing them at us, screaming about signals and conspiracies. One penny hits my cheek, stinging sharply. We turn and run toward the pharmacy, the only open business in sight. The woman follows, her screams echoing off building walls. Through the pharmacy windows, I can see the cashier already reaching for the phone, recognizing trouble. The automatic doors slide open just as the woman launches another handful of coins. We dart inside, and the cashier, his name tag reads, Steve, immediately hits the door lock button. The woman crashes against the glass, still screaming, but the doors hold firm. "Police are on their way," Steve says calmly, guiding us away from the windows. This isn't the first time she's harassed people at that ATM. She needs help, but she's been refusing services. Another employee emerges from the back, carrying bottles of water for us. The woman continues pacing outside, alternating between screaming at us and returning to her mumbled conversations with invisible companions. Her movements become more erratic, but she can't get past the locked doors. When the police arrive, they don't approach with aggression. Instead, a crisis intervention specialist steps out of the car, speaking to the woman in soft, steady tones. It takes time, but gradually her agitation subsides. They manage to convince her to accept help, to go with them to get the care she needs. The incident leads to changes in our community. The bank installs better lighting and security cameras around the ATM. The pharmacy creates a formal safe haven program, training staff to handle various crisis situations. Other businesses follow suit. Local mental health organizations set up outreach programs, providing resources and support before situations escalate to crisis level. The police department expands its crisis intervention team, focusing on de-escalation and connecting people with appropriate services. Mia and I start volunteering with a student organization that promotes mental health awareness and safety on campus. We learn about recognizing signs of crisis, about the importance of both compassion and boundaries, about when and how to seek help for ourselves and others. The pharmacy becomes more than just a safe haven. It becomes a community hub. Steve organizes training sessions for local businesses, teaching them how to handle similar situations. They create a network of safe spaces where people can wait for help if they feel threatened. One positive outcome: the bank moves its ATM inside a secure vestibule, accessible 24/7 with a card swipe. They also install a help button that connects directly to both security and crisis services. Other banks in the area adopt similar measures. The woman gets the help she needed. Months later, we see her again, stable, apologetic, accompanied by a support worker. She's becoming part of the community in a healthy way, even speaking at mental health awareness events about the importance of accepting help. Last week, I noticed a young woman hesitating outside the ATM vestibule, eyeing a man who was acting erratically nearby. Without hesitation, I showed her to the pharmacy, where Steve welcomed her with the same calm efficiency he showed us that night. The experience taught us something valuable about community safety. It's not just about protecting ourselves from danger, but about creating systems that help everyone. Sometimes the person who seems threatening is actually the one most in need of help. Now, when I use the ATM, I'm aware of my surroundings in a different way, not just watching for potential threats, but noticing signs that someone might need assistance. The panic button isn't just for emergencies, it's a connection to a network of people ready to help in whatever way is needed. Because that's what we learned that night. Safety isn't just about locks and lights and security cameras. It's about building communities that look out for everyone, that recognize the difference between danger and distress, that know when to protect and when to help. The coins from that night, the ones we collected from the sidewalk, sit in a jar on Steve's pharmacy counter, not as a reminder of fear, but as a symbol of change. Each penny represents a lesson learned about compassion, community, and the importance of being there for each other, especially in moments of crisis. The beam of my flashlight catches dust motes dancing in the air as I zip up our family-sized tent for the night. It's strange camping indoors, but the renovation project has taken longer than expected, and the hotel costs were eating up our budget. Dad says we're pioneering in our own home, just us, our sleeping bags, and 3,000 square feet of half-finished Victorian architecture. Mom's already nestled in her sleeping bag, grading papers by lantern light. My little sister Emma clutches her stuffed rabbit, finally quiet after an hour of complaints about the hardwood floor beneath our tent. Dad's doing his final security check, a routine he started 3 nights ago after we first heard the footsteps. All exterior doors are locked, he announces, crawling into the tent, windows secured, construction tools put away. He doesn't mention checking the old servants' staircase again, or testing the padlock on the cellar door. We all know he did, just like we all pretend not to hear the sounds that start after midnight. The camping lantern casts warm shadows on the tent walls as we settle in for the night. Through the nylon walls, I can see the outline of plastic sheeting hanging from the living room's exposed beams. The house creaks and shifts around us. Normal sounds, Dad keeps saying, just the old wood adjusting to the renovation changes. Emma falls asleep first, her rabbit tucked under her chin. Mom's red pen scratches against student essays, and Dad taps away on his tablet, reviewing construction plans for tomorrow. I lay awake, watching shadows play across the tent ceiling, trying not to think about what we heard last night. The footsteps always start in the upstairs hallway, distinct, measured steps moving from room to room. At first, we blamed it on raccoons or squirrels, but animals don't walk with such deliberate purpose. They don't pause outside our tent, don't slowly circle it while we hold our breath inside. Tonight, they start earlier than usual. A soft thud from above makes Mom's pen pause mid-correction. Dad stops scrolling on his tablet. We all look up, listening to the familiar pattern begin. Step, step, pause. Step, step, pause. Moving across the upstairs landing. Just the house settling, Dad whispers, but he turns off his tablet. The darkness feels thicker somehow, pressing against our tent walls. Emma stirs in her sleep, hugging her rabbit tighter. The steps reach the main staircase. We can track their descent. 12 distinct creaks, one for each step. In the 3 nights we've been camping here, they've never come down the stairs before. Mom reaches for Dad's hand as the footsteps reach the bottom. Now they're in the hallway outside our living room tent, moving with that same measured pace. Step, step, pause. My flashlight beam catches more dust motes, but these are moving against the air current, swirling in strange patterns. Something brushes against the tent wall. Not the plastic sheeting, but something solid enough to make the nylon ripple. The temperature drops so suddenly I can see our breath clouding in the lantern light. Emma wakes up, her eyes wide, but staying silent. Dad reaches slowly for the lantern switch, and darkness envelops us. Through the tent walls, a faint bluish glow appears, moving around our tent in the same deliberate pattern as the footsteps. Step, step, pause. The glow strengthens with each circuit. Mom starts humming softly, an old lullaby she used to sing when we were little. The footsteps pause. The blue glow flickers, like a candle flame in wind. Then, unexpectedly, a second voice joins Mom's humming, distant and ethereal, but following the melody perfectly. The glow begins to fade, and the footsteps resume, but they're moving away now, back toward the stairs. We listen to them ascend, count 12 creaks again, track their movement across the upper landing until they fade into silence. None of us sleeps much that night. In the morning, Dad discovers something in his research about the house's history. A century ago, it was home to a music teacher who gave lessons in what we're converting into our living room. The library's archives have a photograph of her standing with her students, all of them singing from well-worn hymnals. We make changes after that night. Mom brings her old piano into the unfinished living room, setting it up near our tent. Every evening, she plays simple melodies while we get ready for bed. Emma learns to pick out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on the keys. The footsteps still come, but they're different now. They pause longer by the piano, and sometimes, if Mom's playing when they start, we hear that ethereal humming joining her music. The blue glow becomes more like a gentle nightlight than an eerie presence. Dad adjusts the renovation plans, deciding to keep some of the original features we'd planned to replace. The old wood panels in the music room stay, though we sand and refinish them. The window seat where the music teacher used to sit remains, transformed into built-in storage for sheet music. Word spreads about our unusual living situation. Other families renovating old houses share similar stories. Unexplained footsteps, mysterious music, presences that seem tied to the building's history. A local historian helps us research our house's past, uncovering stories of concerts and recitals held in what will become our living room. Emma starts leaving her music books open on the window seat at night. Sometimes we wake to find the pages turned, as if someone's been reading through them. The house feels different now. Not scary, just occupied by more than just our family. Last week, while installing new lighting fixtures, Dad found a small cache of old sheet music hidden in a wall cavity. The papers were fragile with age, but the songs were still readable, the same lullaby Mom sang that night. We framed them, planning to hang them in the finished living room. The renovation continues, but we're no longer in a rush to change everything. Some nights, when the footsteps come, we simply listen to them move through the house, a reminder that homes hold more than just the present. They hold echoes of all the lives lived within their walls, all the songs sung under their roofs. We still sleep in our tent, though the upstairs bedrooms are nearly finished. Emma says she'll miss our indoor camping when it's over. Mom keeps playing the piano each evening, her music filling the house with new memories while honoring the old ones, because that's what we've learned in our half-finished home. Sometimes the things that frighten us at first can become part of something beautiful, like a symphony where past and present harmonize, creating something richer than either could achieve alone. The neon sign of the gas station flickers against the Moroccan night sky, a lonely beacon on this stretch of highway between Fes and Chefchaouen. My brother Alex sleeps in the passenger seat, his head lolling against the window, completely unaware that we're almost out of fuel. The GPS died 2 hours ago, and my phone hasn't had signal since we left the main road. I ease our rental car into the station, the gravel crunching under our tires. The place looks abandoned except for a single fluorescent light illuminating the counter inside. My high school French won't help much here, and my Arabic is limited to "thank you" and "where is the bathroom?" phrases that suddenly seem inadequate. The dashboard clock reads 1:47 a.m. when I cut the engine. Alex doesn't stir. He could sleep through an earthquake. His wrist is wrapped in an ace bandage from our earlier mishap on the mountain roads. Another reason we're hours behind schedule. The sprained wrist isn't serious, but we should probably have it checked. A man emerges from the station's office, wiping his hands on a red cloth. His smile seems genuine as he approaches, and I feel my tension ease slightly. "Bonsoir, mademoiselle," he says, then switches to heavily accented English. "You are very far from the tourist roads." I explain our situation, the GPS failure, the injury, our dwindling fuel. He nods sympathetically, filling our tank while telling me about a hospital in the next town. "My cousin works there," he says. "I can show you the way. These roads, they are tricky at night." Something in his tone makes me hesitate. The offer seems helpful enough, but why is he so interested in 2 lost tourists? While he's finishing with the fuel, I pretend to wake Alex, whispering to him to stay alert. His eyes open slightly, reading the urgency in my expression. That's when I hear it. The man is speaking rapid Arabic into a walkie-talkie, his friendly demeanor gone. My limited Arabic catches fragments. "To" and "alone," and something about "the old road." A response crackles through, followed by the man's laughter. Alex sits up straighter, fully awake now. The man returns to my window, smile back in place. "Follow my car," he says. "Hospital is only 15 minutes. No charge for fuel, consider it my welcome to Morocco." Free fuel at a remote gas station in the middle of the night, a guide who makes secret radio calls, a conveniently placed cousin at a nearby hospital. The warning bells in my head are deafening. "Actually," I say, reaching for my wallet, "we should find a hotel first. Alex's wrist can wait until morning." I pull out more than enough dirham to cover the fuel, but the man waves it away. "Impossible to find hotels at this hour," he insists. "Please, let me help. The old road is much faster than the highway." Behind him, I notice movement, shadows shifting between the parked trucks at the edge of the lot. Alex's hand finds mine, squeezing once. Our childhood signal for how time to go. I start the engine, keeping my voice steady. "Thank you, but we'll manage. The highway is safer." The man's face changes, friendliness evaporating. He says something into his walkie-talkie, and suddenly vehicles are starting up around us, trucks I hadn't even noticed in the darkness. My heart pounds as I shift into drive, but headlights flash in the distance, a tourist bus approaching the station, its side marked with a familiar hotel chain logo. The man's expression shifts again as he backs away from our car. The surrounding vehicles go quiet. I don't wait to see what happens next. We merge onto the highway just as the bus pulls in, its passengers already spilling out into the fluorescent lighting. In the rearview mirror, I watch the station recede into darkness. 2 hours later, we're checked into a proper hotel in Chefchaouen, its bright lobby filled with other travelers. The night manager helps us file a report about the gas station, marking its location on a map. Apparently, we're not the first to have a strange encounter there. The next day, we learn about a network of safe stops along the tourist routes, designated locations with security cameras and English-speaking staff. Local authorities have been working to make rural areas safer for travelers, establishing emergency contact points and monitoring remote stations. At the hospital, while a doctor checks Alex's wrist, we meet Sarah, an American expatriate who works as a patient liaison. She helps us understand how to navigate the healthcare system and shares her own stories about learning to travel safely in unfamiliar places. The key, she tells us, is to trust your instincts, but not your assumptions. Some of the kindest help I've received has come from strangers, but there's a difference between kindness and manipulation. Learn to recognize the signs. We spend the rest of our trip more prepared, carrying emergency contacts, marking safe stops on our maps, keeping our phones charged. We meet incredible people who go out of their way to help us, proving that one bad experience doesn't define a place or its people. Back home, I start a travel blog about safety tips for solo female travelers. Other women share their stories, their close calls, their lessons learned. Together, we create resources for navigating unfamiliar places while staying alert to potential dangers. The gas station incident leads to positive changes. Tourist authorities install emergency call boxes along remote routes. Local businesses join a safety certification program, displaying stickers that mark them as verified safe stops. Women travelers organize buddy systems and share real-time location updates. Last month, I received an email from a young woman planning her own Moroccan adventure. Instead of scaring her with my story, I shared what I learned. Research your routes, know your resources, trust your instincts, and recognize that most people genuinely want to help. Because that's the real lesson from that night. Not that the world is dangerous, but that being prepared empowers you to explore it safely. Every place has its dark corners, but it also has people working to light them up, to make paths safer for those who follow. Now when I travel, I carry not just maps and emergency numbers, but also the wisdom gained from experience. The world remains full of wonders worth exploring, as long as you remember that caution and adventure can travel side by side. Just one more photo. Rachel raises her camera toward the illuminated cathedral, trying to capture the way moonlight plays across its ancient stones. The Naples evening air is thick with the scent of oregano and garlic from nearby restaurants, making our planned gelato run seem less urgent. After 3 days of touring Italy, we've learned that nothing here runs on schedule anyway. That's when I notice them, the old man in the pressed linen suit and the teenage boy trailing silently behind him. They've appeared in the background of every place we've stopped tonight. The piazza, the fountain, the little cafe where we had dinner. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence in a tourist area, but their movements seemed too coordinated, too purposeful. Rachel, I whisper, touching her arm. Don't look now, but those two people from the fountain are back. She lowers her camera slowly, pretending to check the photos while glancing over her shoulder. The man waves cheerfully like we're old friends and starts walking toward us. Beautiful night for photography, he says in heavily accented English, stopping uncomfortably close. The teenager hovers behind him, eyes downcast, completely silent. You girls must be American. So tall, so confident. His smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. Rachel shifts closer to me, her camera clutched against her chest. We should get going, she says, taking a step back. Our tour group is waiting. It's a lie. We're traveling independently, but it seems safer than admitting we're alone. The man's smile widens. No tour group tonight, I think. I see you all evening. Just two girls. He gestures to the silent teenager. My nephew. He studies English. Wants to practice. Perhaps we all get coffee? I know perfect place. Very private. Warning bells scream in my head. The teenager hasn't looked up once. Hasn't shown any interest in practicing English. His stillness feels forced, unnatural, like he's trying to make himself invisible. No, thank you, Rachel says firmly. We turn to leave, but the man steps in front of us, still smiling that empty smile. His hand shoots out, grabbing Rachel's arm just above her elbow. My heart lurches into my throat. Don't be rude, he says, voice hardening. I just want to help boy learn Italian. You look Italian, yes? Perfect practice. Neither Rachel nor I look remotely Italian. We're both blonde and obviously tourists. The teenager shifts uncomfortably but remains silent. Rachel tries to pull away, but his grip tightens. Let go, she demands, louder now. A few passers-by glance our way, but no one stops. The man starts speaking rapidly in Italian, trying to steer Rachel toward a dark side street. That's when my self-defense training kicks in. Polizia, I shout at the top of my lungs, my voice echoing off the cathedral walls. Aiuto, help! The man releases Rachel's arm, stepping back quickly. The teenager finally looks up, his expression a mix of fear and relief. Lights flick on in surrounding buildings. A window opens above us, an elderly woman leaning out to see what's happening. Two waiters emerge from a nearby restaurant, walking purposefully toward us. The man's demeanor changes instantly. Just trying to be friendly, he says, raising his hands in mock surrender. No need for dramatics. He backs away, pulling the teenager with him. They disappear down a side street, leaving us shaking in the cathedral square. The waiters reach us, asking rapid-fire questions in Italian and broken English. When they understand what happened, they usher us into their restaurant, calling the police while the owner brings us water and tries to calm us down. The police arrive quickly, taking our statements and descriptions. They seem unsurprised by the story, showing us photos of known harassers who target tourists. The restaurant owner, Marina, calls her daughter to translate, helping us understand the officers' questions. That night becomes a turning point in our trip, but not in the way you might expect. Marina refuses to let us walk back to our hotel alone, instead inviting us to wait while she closes the restaurant. Her daughter, Anna, who studies tourism at the local university, shares stories about initiatives to make the city safer for visitors. We learn about safe zones, businesses that participate in a program to help tourists in trouble. Marina's restaurant displays a blue, Safe Tourism sticker in its window, marking it as a place where travelers can seek help. Anna shows us an app that maps these safe locations throughout the city. The next day, we join a free walking tour led by local university students. They teach us about staying safe in Naples, which areas to avoid after dark, how to recognize potential scams, where to find help if needed. But they also show us the city's beauty, its hidden treasures, its genuine hospitality. Anna introduces us to a network of female travelers who share safety tips and support each other. Through their social media group, we connect with other women exploring Italy, creating impromptu buddy systems for evening adventures. Rachel's photo of the cathedral ends up being used in a tourist safety campaign, alongside information about the Safe Zones program. The image captures both the beauty of Naples at night and the importance of being aware while traveling. We stay in Naples 3 days longer than planned, but now we explore differently. We know which restaurants are safe havens, which shops stay open late, which streets are well patrolled. Marina's becomes our regular dinner spot, where we meet other travelers and share stories. The experience changes how we travel, but it doesn't diminish our love for exploration. We learn to balance caution with curiosity, awareness with adventure. Most importantly, we discover that for every person who means harm, there are dozens ready to help. Last week, I received a message from a solo traveler who found herself in a similar situation in Naples. She remembered the safe zone sticker from our social media posts and knew exactly where to seek help. Marina's restaurant sheltered her until police arrived. Now when people ask about Naples, I tell them about Marina's homemade limoncello and Anna's historical tours. I tell them about the elderly woman who watched from her window until she knew we were safe, about the waiters who responded without hesitation to strangers in trouble. Because that's the real story of that night. Not the fear or the close call, but the community that emerged to protect us. In the end, the man in the linen suit taught us something valuable. True hospitality doesn't demand, it offers. Real kindness creates safety, not fear. Chicken nuggets are totally worth the walk, Mike insists, jingling the loose change in his pocket. It's nearly midnight, but our study group hit that point where caffeine isn't cutting it anymore. Only McDonald's Golden Arches, glowing 3 blocks away, promise the sustenance we need to finish our biology finals prep. Sarah and Chris nod eagerly, already packing up their textbooks. The campus library closed an hour ago, forcing us to relocate our study session to the 24-hour coffee shop. Now even that's not enough. We need real food, even if real means processed chicken and French fries. The night air carries a hint of coming rain as we start our walk. The street's quiet, except for distant traffic. Our small town doesn't quite sleep at night, but it definitely dozes. Streetlights cast pools of yellow light at regular intervals, making our shadows stretch and shrink as we walk. Did you guys study for the genetics section? Sarah asks, but I'm distracted by movement ahead. A woman in what might have once been a business suit paces near the corner, talking animatedly to herself. Her clothes are stained and wrinkled, her hair wild and uncombed. Let's cross here, I suggest quietly, nudging Mike toward the other side of the street. But before we can move, the woman's head snaps up. Her eyes lock onto our group with an intensity that makes my skin prickle. "They're coming," she shouts, her voice echoing off brick buildings. "They're all around us. Can't you see them?" She starts moving toward us, her movements jerky and unpredictable. Her hands clutch something I can't quite make out. We pick up our pace, trying to pass by quickly without running. Running sometimes makes things worse. Another lesson learned from late nights on campus. But the woman matches our speed, then exceeds it, her voice rising to a screech. "Don't ignore me. They're here. They're watching." Something hits the pavement behind us with a sharp crack. I glance back to see rocks scattered on the sidewalk. The woman is picking up more from a landscaping border, her movements becoming more agitated. "Go," Mike says quietly, and we break into a run. The woman follows, her screams becoming more incoherent as she hurls rocks at us. One bounces off Chris's backpack, another whizzes past my ear. Her footsteps pound the pavement behind us, impossibly fast. The McDonald's sign seems much further away now. Sarah spots the lit windows of the campus security office ahead. Not our original destination, but definitely our best option. We sprint toward it, the woman screams and footsteps getting closer. "They're in your heads. I can see them. Stop running." Another rock hits the ground beside us. The security office door looks a mile away, though it can't be more than 50 feet. My lungs burn as we run, fear giving us speed we didn't know we had. The security officer must have heard the commotion through his open window. He's already opening the door as we approach, ushering us inside. The woman stops at the edge of the office's floodlights, rocks still clutched in her hands, her eyes wild and unfocused. "Evening, Martha," the officer says calmly, stepping outside. His voice is gentle but firm. "Having a rough night?" The woman, Martha, stops screaming, though her breathing comes in sharp gasps. The rocks tumble from her hands. "They're everywhere, Officer Jim," she says, her voice smaller now. "In their heads. In everyone's heads. I was trying to warn them." She gestures vaguely toward us. swaying slightly on her feet. "I know," Officer Jim says softly. "How about we call Carol? She can help you see things more clearly." He reaches slowly for his phone while maintaining eye contact with Martha. Her shoulders slump as the fight drains out of her. We learn later that Martha is well known to campus security. A former professor who experienced a mental health crisis, she now experiences episodes of paranoia when she goes off her medication. Carol, we discover, is her crisis counselor. The incident leads to changes in how our campus handles late-night safety. The coffee shop partners with a local delivery service to bring food to studying students. Security installs emergency call boxes along popular walking routes. The student government starts a volunteer escort service for late-night walks. Most importantly, the university expands its mental health outreach program. They create a crisis response team specifically trained to help people experiencing mental health emergencies. Martha gets connected with better support services, including a monitored medication program. Over the next few months, we see Martha around campus occasionally, not throwing rocks or screaming, but sitting quietly in the library or walking with her counselor. She looks different when she's stable, professional, dignified, though her eyes carry a sadness we understand better now. Our study group still gets late-night cravings, but we handle them differently. We use the delivery service, or we walk in larger groups, or we ask for security escorts. Not out of fear, but out of awareness that safety means looking out for everyone, ourselves and others who might be struggling. The coffee shop starts hosting mental health awareness events, bringing in counselors to talk about recognizing crisis symptoms and knowing how to respond. Officer Jim teaches a workshop on de-escalation techniques, helping students understand how to handle difficult situations safely. Sarah, who's studying psychology, does her final project on community mental health resources. She interviews Carol about crisis intervention, learning how to balance compassion with personal safety. The project leads to a peer support program that helps students recognize and respond to mental health emergencies. Last week, I saw 2 students help a disoriented person find their way to the campus health center. They kept a safe distance while showing concern, exactly as we'd learned in the awareness workshops. The person got the help they needed without the situation escalating. The rocks Martha threw that night sit in a jar on Officer Jim's desk, not as trophies, but as teaching tools. He uses them in his safety workshops to demonstrate how quickly situations can escalate, and how the right response can make all the difference. Because that's what we learned that night. Sometimes the scariest situations aren't about good versus bad, but about people struggling to maintain their grip on reality. True safety isn't just about protecting ourselves from others. It's about creating communities that help everyone feel secure. Now when students share late-night walking stories, we talk about resources more than risks. We've learned to recognize the difference between genuine threats and cries for help. Most importantly, we've learned that the best response to fear is building better support systems for everyone involved. "I swear we passed that same tree 10 minutes ago," Jen says from the passenger seat, squinting at the dark shapes looming beyond our headlights. The mountain road winds endlessly through pine forest, each curve looking identical to the last. Our GPS lost signal an hour ago, leaving us with nothing but an old paper map and our questionable sense of direction. We're taking the scenic route back from a weekend hiking trip, though scenic seems laughable now that night has erased the mountain views. The clock on my dashboard reads 11:23 p.m., and we haven't seen another car in at least 40 minutes. Wait. Jen suddenly sits up straighter, leaning forward. "What's that?" Something glints in our headlights ahead, a metallic flash that seems out of place among the trees. I slow down, squinting through the darkness. That's when we see it. A steel cable stretched across the road at windshield height, anchored between trees on either side. I hit the brakes, our car skidding slightly on the gravel shoulder as we stop about 30 feet from the cable. That shouldn't be there." Jen's voice shakes slightly. We sit in silence, engine idling, staring at the cable. It's thin enough to be nearly invisible until you're right up on it, thick enough to cause serious damage to any vehicle. Or worse, maybe it's from a logging operation, I suggest, but we both know that's wrong. The cable is too perfectly positioned, too deliberately placed. This was meant to stop vehicles, to force them to stop exactly where we are now, isolated, vulnerable, in the dark. Headlights suddenly appear in my rearview mirror, coming around the curve behind us. Relief floods through me for a moment. Other people, help, safety in numbers. Then I notice how fast the vehicle is approaching, how it's not slowing down despite our obvious stop in the road. Hold on, I warn Jen, then pull off onto the shoulder as the approaching vehicle swerves around us. It's a dark truck, no license plate visible in the glare of its high beams. Instead of stopping at the cable, it turns sharply into a hidden dirt track just before it. Two more sets of headlights appear behind us. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They're working together. The cable is their trap, and we've driven right into it. Call 911, I tell Jen, but she's already shaking her head, showing me her phone's no service screen. The trucks behind us are moving now, one going off-road to our left, another to our right. They're trying to box us in. Years of driving mountain roads kicks in. I shift into reverse, thankful for the all-wheel drive I initially thought was overkill on my commuter car. Hang on, I say again, and hit the gas. We shoot backward past the approaching trucks, their headlights illuminating shocked faces behind their windshields. The road curves sharply about 50 yards back. I remember it from our drive up. If I can make it around that bend, we might have a chance. The trucks scramble to turn around, but their larger size works against them on the narrow road. That's when I spot our salvation, a Forest Service fire road, its gate standing open. Without hesitation, I swing our car onto it, killing our lights as soon as we're around the first bend. The trucks roar past on the main road, their occupants probably assuming we continued backward. We sit in total darkness, hearts pounding, listening to the trucks. Engines fade into the distance. Jen's hand finds mine, squeezing tight. We wait 10 minutes, though it feels like hours, before I dare to turn on our parking lights. The fire road, it turns out, connects to a different highway, 15 miles south. We emerge near a well-lit rest stop, complete with state police officers on their coffee break. Our story sends them scrambling to their vehicles, calling for backup as they head toward the mountain road. The next few hours are a blur of police statements and hot vending machine coffee. We learn that there have been other incidents, reports of suspicious vehicles, missing road signs, strange obstacles placed on remote roads, but no one had encountered the cable before. The experience changes how our community approaches mountain safety. The Forest Service installs emergency call boxes along remote routes. Local off-road clubs organize night patrols of back roads. The police create a special task force for road safety, complete with a hotline for reporting suspicious activity. Jen and I still go hiking, still take scenic routes, but we do it differently now. We invested in satellite emergency beacons. We always travel with full gas tanks and emergency supplies. Most importantly, we share our routes with friends and check in at designated times. Our story becomes a catalyst for broader changes. The Department of Transportation improves signage and lighting on mountain roads. Local businesses along remote routes join a safe haven network, offering 24-hour assistance to travelers. Community groups organize defensive driving courses focusing on rural road safety. Last month, a young couple avoided a similar trap because they'd read about our experience. They recognized the warning signs and knew what to do. Stay mobile, find a safe place, report the incident. Their quick thinking helped authorities finally catch some of the people responsible. The fire road where we hid that night now has a proper gate and security cameras. Local hiking groups maintain it as an emergency route, marking it with reflective signs visible only when you need them. What was once a forgotten access road has become a symbol of community resilience. We created a website sharing mountain road safety tips, marking safe routes and rest stops, connecting travelers with local support networks. Other communities have adopted our model, creating their own safety networks in rural areas. Because that's what we learned that night. Safety isn't just about avoiding danger, it's about building networks of support and knowledge. Every dark road becomes less frightening when you know where the safe harbors are, when you understand that you're not truly alone. Now, when I drive mountain roads at night, I still feel that flutter of apprehension when my headlights catch something unusual, but it's tempered by knowledge of escape routes, of emergency procedures, of communities ready to help. The mountains haven't lost their beauty. We've just learned to appreciate them more wisely. The first note appears between pages 143 and 144 of my psychology textbook during Monday's lecture. Your smile brightens my whole day. The handwriting is unfamiliar, the paper torn from a yellow legal pad. I glance around the lecture hall, but everyone seems focused on Professor Chen's explanation of cognitive biases. It seems harmless enough, sweet, even, in an old-fashioned way. I tuck the note into my backpack and forget about it until Wednesday, when I find another one tucked into my jacket pocket while it hangs on the back of my chair in the cafeteria. This one reads, "Blue is definitely your color. You should wear it more often." The fact that someone touched my jacket without me noticing sends a chill down my spine. I'm wearing green today. They must have seen me in blue yesterday. Looking around the crowded cafeteria, I can't shake the feeling of being watched. That's when he approaches my table, tall, well-dressed, with a confident smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm Daniel," he says, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "I've seen you around campus. I think we'd have a lot in common." I explain politely that I'm trying to study, but he doesn't take the hint. Instead, he launches into a monologue about his interests, his achievements, his plans for the future. When I start packing up my books, his smile falters slightly. "We should get coffee sometime," he says, more command than question. "I know this great little place off campus." I decline as gently as possible, mentioning a non-existent boyfriend. His expression darkens for a moment before he forces another smile. "You shouldn't lie," he says softly. "I know you're single. I've been watching you." He stands up, straightening his jacket. "Think about the coffee. I'll change your mind eventually." The notes increase after that. They appear everywhere. In my textbooks, my locker at the gym, even slipped under the windshield wiper of my car. Each one more personal than the last, showing an increasingly detailed knowledge of my daily routine. I start varying my schedule, taking different routes to classes, studying in new locations. But Daniel always finds me. He sits nearby in the library, follows me to the campus coffee shop, appears outside my classrooms, always smiling that empty smile, always pushing for that coffee date. When I firmly tell him I'm not interested, he becomes angry. "You're just playing hard to get," he insists, his voice rising. "We're perfect for each other. Why can't you see that?" Other students stare, but no one intervenes. The situation escalates when he starts showing up at my part-time job at the campus bookstore. He buys single pens just to go through my checkout line, making comments about my schedule, my clothes, my conversations with other customers. My coworker Emma notices my discomfort and starts switching registers with me when he appears. She encourages me to report him to campus security, but I hesitate. He hasn't explicitly threatened me. Isn't this just awkward flirting? The breaking point comes during a late-night study session. I'm walking to my car when I spot him waiting beside it, another note in his hand. The parking lot is almost empty. My hands shake as I turn around and walk quickly back to the library. The security officer who responds takes one look at my collection of notes and immediately understands the situation. She helps me file a report, documenting every interaction, every unwanted appearance, every boundary crossed. Campus security implements immediate changes. They escort me to my car after evening classes. The bookstore manager adjusts my schedule and installs better security cameras. My professors allow me to switch seats when necessary, helping me maintain unpredictable patterns. The Women's Center organizes a seminar on recognizing and responding to stalking behavior. Other students come forward with similar stories. Together, we create a support network, sharing safety strategies and watching out for each other. The university revises its harassment policies, making them clearer and more comprehensive. They install emergency call boxes across campus and develop a safety app that lets students alert security with one touch. Daniel receives an official warning, then a campus restraining order. When he violates it by leaving more notes, the university takes stronger action. He's required to attend counseling sessions and adjust his schedule to avoid contact with me. The experience changes how I move through the world, but not in the way he intended. Instead of becoming fearful, I become more aware, more prepared. I take self-defense classes, learning not just physical techniques but psychological strategies for maintaining boundaries. Emma and I start a peer support group for students dealing with unwanted attention. We teach others how to recognize red flags, document incidents, and access campus resources. The group grows quickly, becoming a source of strength and solidarity. The campus newspaper runs a series on personal safety and respect, featuring stories from students who faced similar situations. The articles lead to discussions in classes, in dorms, in student organizations, conversations about boundaries, consent, and supporting each other. Last week, a freshman came to our support group, shaken by persistent unwanted attention from another student. Instead of feeling helpless, she found a community ready to help her navigate the situation safely and legally. The notes I received are now part of a training packet for resident advisors, teaching them to recognize escalating behavior patterns. What was meant to intimidate has become a tool for education and prevention, because that's what we learned. Unwanted attention isn't flattering or romantic. It's about control. Real connections don't need force or manipulation. They grow from mutual respect, clear boundaries, and the freedom to say no. Now, when I walk across campus, I see signs of positive change everywhere. The emergency call boxes, the safety app promotions, the growing network of peer support groups. What started as one person's attempt to control through fear has transformed into a community dedicated to protecting everyone's right to feel safe. The fluorescent sign buzzed overhead, casting an electric blue glow across my windshield. Darlene's Diner. I'd been staring at road signs for so long they'd started to blur together, but this one caught my attention. Maybe it was the way it flickered, or maybe it was just my desperate need for caffeine, but something drew me to pull into the gravel lot. I hadn't seen another car for hours. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, a black ribbon cutting through nothing but darkness. The diner's windows glowed like a beacon, and I could make out a few figures seated inside. At least I wasn't the only one seeking refuge from the endless night. The door chimed as I pushed it open, and warm air rushed to meet me. The smell of coffee and grease wrapped around me like an old blanket, familiar and somehow off at the same time. A woman behind the counter looked up immediately, her smile too wide, too ready, like she'd been waiting for me. "Evening, hon," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "Just you tonight?" I nodded and slid into one of the booths by the window. The vinyl seat squeaked beneath me, and I noticed how quiet it was. Diners usually had some kind of background noise, dishes clinking, coffee percolating, maybe a radio playing softly. But this place was silent, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. There were maybe 4 other people scattered around the diner, but something about them seemed wrong. They weren't eating or talking or even looking at their phones. They just sat there, perfectly still, staring straight ahead. The woman, Darlene, I assumed from the sign, brought me a menu, but I didn't need to look at it. "Just coffee, please," I said, trying to ignore the way her smile never wavered. As she walked away, I couldn't help but notice the man sitting in the booth across from me. His hands rested on the table, completely motionless. His eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. I shifted uncomfortably, trying to avoid his gaze, but it was like I could feel it boring into me. Darlene returned with my coffee, setting it down with a soft clink. I tried to give her a polite smile, but it felt forced. Everything about this place felt wrong, like stepping into a dream where nothing quite makes sense. "Where you headed?" she asked, lingering by my table. "Just passing through," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and lukewarm, but I didn't care. I just wanted to leave. She nodded slowly, like she knew something I didn't. Not many folks come through here this time of night. I glanced out the window, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. The parking lot was empty except for my car, and beyond that was just darkness. No other buildings, no streetlights, just the road disappearing into black. The silence in the diner grew heavier, pressing against my ears. I looked around again and my stomach turned when I realized they were all looking at me now. Every single person in the diner had their eyes fixed on me, their faces blank, but their gazes intense. I looked down at my coffee, trying to steady my breathing. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But when I looked up again, they were still staring. "Everything all right, hun?" Darlene's voice made me jump. She was standing behind the counter, her hands resting on it as she watched me closely, too closely. "I'm fine," I said, my voice shaky. "I think I'll get the check." Her smile didn't falter, but something changed in her eyes. She didn't move. "You sure you don't want anything to eat? We make a great pie." "No, I'm good, really," I said, standing up quickly. I reached for my jacket, ready to leave, but when I turned toward the door, my heart stopped. The door was locked. A heavy chain looped through the handles, secured with a padlock. I hadn't noticed it when I came in. I turned back to Darlene, my mouth dry. "Why is the door locked?" She didn't answer right away, just kept smiling at me like nothing was wrong. "Oh, don't worry about that. It's for your own safety. Lots of strange folks out on the road at night." I took a step back, my pulse racing. "I think I'd like to go now." Darlene tilted her head, her smile never leaving her face. "You haven't finished your coffee." I looked around desperately for another way out. The other customers hadn't moved, still sitting there like mannequins, their eyes locked on me. My hands were shaking, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Unlock the door, please." Instead of responding, Darlene walked over to the counter and picked up a phone. She held it in her hand, watching me. "I'll just give our friend a call. He'll want to know you're here." I didn't wait to hear more. I bolted for the back of the diner, hoping there would be another exit. My heart was pounding in my chest as I ran past the kitchen, the smell of grease and old food hanging in the air. I pushed open a door that led to a narrow hallway, and at the end of it, I saw a door marked "Exit." I nearly cried with relief as I sprinted toward it, but when I reached it and pushed on the handle, it didn't budge. The door was locked, just like the front. Panic set in, real and sharp. I pounded on the door, hoping maybe someone outside could hear me, but I knew it was pointless. There was no one around for miles. I turned around, my back against the door, trying to catch my breath. That's when I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the hallway. It was one of the men from the diner, the one who had been sitting closest to me. He was walking toward me, his face blank, his eyes fixed on mine. "Darlene says you should come back," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. I backed away, my hands fumbling for something, anything to defend myself with. But there was nothing, just a dead end and a locked door. I ran past him, back into the diner, hoping maybe I could find something heavy to break the lock on the door. But when I got back to the front, Darlene was waiting for me. Her smile was gone now, replaced with something colder. "You're not leaving until he gets here," she said, her voice low. "You might as well sit down." I felt the room spinning, my vision narrowing. Without thinking, I grabbed a chair and swung it at the window, shattering the glass. The sound was deafening, but I didn't stop. I climbed through the broken window, cutting my hands on the shards, and ran to my car. My hands were slick with sweat as I fumbled for my keys. I jumped into the car, started the engine, and peeled out of the lot. I didn't look back until the diner's lights had disappeared into the distance, swallowed by the darkness. I drove until sunrise, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached. I never found out who he was or what they wanted with me. But sometimes, when I pass a diner late at night, I can still see their blank stares and Darlene's too wide smile in my mind. I don't stop at roadside diners anymore, no matter how tired I am. The morning air had that perfect crispness to it, the kind that makes your lungs feel clean and your steps feel lighter. I'd been running this same route for 3 years, a quiet loop around Henderson Park that wound through pine trees and past a small pond. It was my time, my space to clear my head before the world really woke up. The sky was still that soft gray that comes just before sunrise when I parked my car in the usual spot. I did my regular stretches, put in my earbuds, and started my warm-up walk toward the trail. Everything felt normal, peaceful even. That's what makes me think about it more now, how ordinary it all seemed at first. I was about 10 minutes into my run when I first noticed him, just a figure standing between 2 pine trees off to the side of the path. I probably wouldn't have even registered his presence if he hadn't been so still. Most people move around a bit, check their phones, undied, or at least shift their weight from one foot to another. But he was completely motionless, like a statue someone had placed there overnight. I kept running, trying to focus on my breathing and the rhythm of my feet hitting the ground. But something about him nagged at the back of my mind. Maybe it was the way he was dressed, a dark jacket despite the warming spring morning, or maybe it was just that stillness. As I came around the curve near the pond, I got that feeling you get when someone's watching you. You know the one, like little pins pricking the back of your neck. I glanced around and there he was again, in a different spot but with that same unnatural stillness. Only this time, I could tell he was facing my direction. My pace quickened slightly, though I tried to tell myself I was being ridiculous. Plenty of people used the park in the morning. Some were just more peculiar than others. But when I completed another loop and saw him again, closer to the path this time, my heart started to race. And it wasn't from the exercise. I pulled out one earbud, suddenly needing to be more aware of my surroundings. The morning birds were chattering in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. Normal sounds, safe sounds, but they felt far away compared to the sound of my own breathing and footsteps. I decided to cut through the middle of the park instead of completing my usual loop. As I turned onto the shortcut path, movement caught my eye. He had changed positions again, and this time I was certain he was definitely watching me. He stood near a bench, his face shadowed but clearly turned in my direction. My mind started racing through my options. I could head back to my car, but that would mean passing closer to where he stood. I could continue on the path, which led toward the more populated area of the park. But at this early hour, populated might mean 1 or 2 other people at most. I picked up my pace, trying to look confident and unafraid. I'd read somewhere that showing fear can encourage stalkers. The path curved again, and I lost sight of him momentarily behind some bushes. When I could see that section of the park again, my blood ran cold. He had moved much closer, and now I could see his face, or at least I should have been able to. But it was like my eyes couldn't quite focus on his features, like trying to remember someone from a dream. The only other person I could see in the park was an elderly man walking his dog near the playground, too far away to be of any help. I pulled out my phone, keeping my pace steady while I pretended to take a call. "Hey, yeah, I'm almost done with my run," I said to no one, my voice shaking slightly. "Yes, I'm at Henderson Park. Should be at my car in 5 minutes." When I looked up again, he had moved even closer to the path. He wasn't trying to hide it anymore, just standing there, watching, waiting. I could feel his eyes on me even though I still couldn't make out his face clearly. My legs felt heavy, like in those nightmares where you try to run but can't move fast enough. I changed direction again, heading toward the park entrance. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I picked up speed. Part of me wanted to look back, to make sure he wasn't following, but another part knew that seeing him behind me would be worse than not knowing. The squeak of shoes on pavement made the decision for me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him walking, gliding almost along the path. He wasn't running, but somehow he was keeping pace with me. His movements were smooth, unnaturally so, like someone had filmed him walking and was playing it at the wrong speed. I broke into a sprint, no longer caring if he knew I was afraid. The park entrance seemed impossibly far away. My lungs were burning, and the sound of blood rushing in my ears almost drowned out everything else. Almost, but not quite, because I could hear footsteps behind me, getting closer. When I finally reached the parking lot, I ran straight to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the unlock button on my key fob. I yanked the door open and jumped inside, locking it immediately. As I tried to catch my breath, I looked around the parking lot. He was standing at the edge of the tree line, perfectly still again, watching. I started my car and backed out of the space so quickly I almost hit the cart return. As I pulled away, I kept checking my rearview mirror. He never moved, never tried to follow the car. He just stood there, watching me leave. I drove straight home, my gym clothes soaked with cold sweat. When I got inside, I immediately looked up the park's community Facebook page. I wanted to post something, to warn others, but what would I say? I saw a man standing in the park. He watched me run. Nothing he did was technically threatening. He never spoke to me, never chased me, never made any obvious aggressive moves. But thinking about that unnatural stillness, the way he moved, and how I couldn't quite focus on his face, it made my skin crawl. I didn't run for a week after that. When I finally worked up the courage to go back to the park, I went in the middle of the day when it was busy with families and dog walkers. I kept expecting to see him there, standing between the trees, watching, but he wasn't there. Sometimes I think about going back to my early morning runs. I miss the quiet, the solitude, the peace of having the park almost to myself. But then I remember that stillness and that feeling of being watched, and I realize some peace of mind isn't worth the risk. I still run, but never alone, never in the early morning, and never at Henderson Park. And I always check between the trees as I pass them, just to make sure there isn't someone standing there, perfectly still, watching and waiting. The headache had started as a dull throb behind my eyes, but after 4 hours of driving, it felt like someone was squeezing my skull in a vice. The prescription bottle in my glove compartment was my last hope. My doctor had given it to me months ago, but I'd never needed it until now. I just had to find a pharmacy to fill it. When I spotted the small building with its glowing green cross, I almost cried with relief. The sign above the door read, "Wilson's Pharmacy," in faded letters, and though the place looked dated, the open sign flickered welcomingly in the window. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered, and the smell hit me immediately. That sharp antiseptic scent mixed with something else, something metallic. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pallor over the dusty shelves lined with medications and sundries. Behind the counter stood a man in a white coat, his thin gray hair combed over a balding spot. He didn't look up when I approached, just kept writing something in a large ledger book. Who still uses those? With mechanical precision. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the empty store. "I need to get this filled." I held out my prescription slip. He looked up then, and something about his eyes made me want to take a step back. They were an odd shade of gray, almost colorless, and they didn't seem to blink enough. "Of course," he said, his voice as colorless as his eyes. He took the paper from my hand, his fingers brushing against mine. They were ice cold. I watched as he read the prescription, his lips moving silently. Then he did something odd. He brought the paper to his nose and inhaled deeply, as if smelling it. "Wait here," he said, turning toward the shelves behind him. "I have something better for you." "Better?" I asked. "No. I just need what's prescribed, please." He ignored me, pulling bottles from different shelves and muttering to himself. The headache pounded harder, making it difficult to focus. I heard bottles clinking, a mortar and pestle grinding, more muttering. When he turned back around, he was holding an unmarked bottle filled with pale blue pills. "These will work much better for what ails you," he said, pushing them across the counter. I stared at the bottle. The pills inside looked nothing like what my doctor had prescribed. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I need the medication on my prescription." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "No mistake. These are what you need. Trust me, I've been doing this a long time." "I'd rather have what my doctor prescribed," I insisted, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing unease in my stomach. His expression hardened. "These are the same thing," he said, his voice taking on an edge. "Just a different manufacturer. Better. Really? Probably even cheaper." I reached for my prescription slip, still lying on the counter between us. "I think I'll try another pharmacy." His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. His grip was like ice, and surprisingly strong for such a thin man. "You need to take what I give you," he said quietly. I tried to pull away, but his fingers only tightened. "Let go of me," I said, my voice shaking. "These pills," he said, pushing the bottle toward me with his free hand, "are exactly what you need. I know better than some doctor what you need." "You're hurting me," I said, still trying to free my wrist. "Let go, or I'm calling the police." He smiled then, and it was terrible, like someone who had learned about smiling from a book, but had never actually done it before. "No one's going to answer. Not here. Not at this hour." I looked around desperately, suddenly aware of how empty the store was. The windows had grown dark. How long had I been here? The fluorescent light seemed dimmer now, creating deep shadows in the corners of the store. "Just take the pills," he said, his voice almost gentle now. "It's easier if you just take them." With my free hand, I reached for my phone in my pocket. He saw the movement and reached across the counter, trying to grab my other arm. I took advantage of his shift in balance to wrench my wrist free and stumbled backward. "You're making a mistake," he called after me as I backed toward the door. "Those pills of yours won't help. Only mine can help now." I reached behind me for the door handle, keeping my eyes on him. He came out from behind the counter, still holding the bottle of blue pills. "Don't leave," he said. "You need these. You'll see that soon enough." My fingers found the handle and I pulled, but the door didn't open. My heart nearly stopped. Had he locked it? But then I pushed instead of pulled, and the door swung open. I practically fell outside, the cool air hitting me like a slap. I ran to my car, fumbling with my keys. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I could see him standing in the doorway of the pharmacy, still holding the bottle of blue pills, watching me drive away. The headache was still there, pounding away, but I didn't care. I drove until I found a chain pharmacy in the next town, one with bright lights and other customers and a pharmacist who didn't try to force strange pills on me. Later that night, safely home with my proper prescription filled, I tried to look up Wilson's Pharmacy online. I couldn't find any record of it. No website, no reviews, not even an address. According to the internet, it didn't exist. Sometimes when I have a headache, I think about those pale blue pills, and I wonder what they really were. I wonder how many other travelers with prescriptions to fill have stopped at that pharmacy. How many of them took the pills the pharmacist offered, and what happened to them afterward. I still get headaches sometimes, but now I make sure to get my prescriptions filled before any long trips. And if I ever do need to stop at a pharmacy in a small town, I check to make sure there are other customers inside first. And if there aren't, if there's just a single pharmacist behind the counter with colorless eyes and cold hands, I keep driving. No headache is worth the risk of finding out what was really in those blue pills. My therapist had suggested a weekend away might help with the stress, somewhere quiet, away from the constant noise and pressure of the city. When I found the listing for Willow Creek Bed Breakfast online, the photos seemed perfect. A Victorian mansion with wraparound porch, lace curtains floating in open windows, and gardens that looked like something from a storybook. The reviews all mentioned how peaceful it was, how the owner, Nora, made everyone feel at home. I booked it immediately, dreaming of quiet mornings with coffee and a book, maybe some afternoon walks in the garden. The house was exactly as pictured, its white paint gleaming in the afternoon sun when I pulled up. Nora met me at the door before I could even ring the bell. She was older, probably in her 70s, wearing a flowing dress that seemed to belong to another era. Her smile was warm, but her eyes, they studied me with an intensity that made me slightly uncomfortable. "Welcome, welcome," she said, ushering me inside. "I've been waiting for you." The interior was beautiful, if a bit cluttered. Antique furniture, shelves of old books, and vases of fresh flowers everywhere. But something felt off about it, like when you walk into a museum after hours. Everything too perfect, too still. "You're my only guest this weekend," Nora said, leading me upstairs. "It's been quite busy lately, but you've come at a quiet time." She paused, turning to look at me. "Do you live alone?" The question caught me off guard. Yes, I do." "And does anyone know you're here?" Her tone was casual, but something about the way she asked made my skin prickle. "My friend does," I lied, trying to sound confident. "She's expecting me to check in with her later." Nora nodded slowly, like she was filing this information away. She showed me to my room, a spacious corner chamber with a 4-poster bed and antique vanity. As she explained about breakfast times and where to find extra towels, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching my every movement, cataloging my reactions. That night, I tried to read in bed, but kept getting distracted by sounds in the hallway. Soft footsteps, the creak of floorboards, the whisper of fabric against walls. Each time I looked out, there was nothing there, just the long, dark hallway and closed doors of empty rooms. I must have finally dozed off, because when I opened my eyes again, it was 3 a.m. Something had woken me, but I wasn't sure what. Then I noticed it. My phone charger, which I'd left plugged in by the nightstand, was now coiled neatly on the desk across the room. My suitcase, in which I'd left open on the luggage stand, was now zipped closed and moved to the corner. My heart started pounding. I knew I hadn't moved these things. Someone had been in my room while I slept. I got up, checking that the door was locked. It was, but that didn't make me feel any better. Someone obviously had a key. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, just sat in the armchair by the window, watching the door and listening to the house creak and settle around me. At breakfast, Nora acted completely normal, serving coffee and homemade muffins while chatting about the house's history. I wanted to confront her about my room, but every time I tried to bring it up, she'd smoothly change the subject, talking about the weather or asking oddly personal questions about my life back home. That second night, I made sure everything in my room was exactly where I wanted it. I even placed a few things strategically, my hairbrush at a specific angle on the vanity, my shoes pointed precisely toward the door. I took photos with my phone, determined to prove to myself if anything moved. I probably should have left then, but something made me stay. Curiosity maybe, or stubbornness, or just the embarrassment of admitting I was scared of an old woman and some moved objects. The scratching woke me up, a soft, persistent sound coming from the hallway. I lay perfectly still, my heart thundering in my chest, as it grew closer to my door. Then I heard it, the soft click of a key in the lock. I shut my eyes almost completely, leaving just enough of a slit to see through my lashes. The door opened silently, and Nora slipped in. In the dim light from the hallway, she looked different. Her movements too smooth for someone her age, her head tilted at an unnatural angle as she surveyed the room. She moved to my suitcase first, opening it carefully and going through my things. Not like she was looking for anything specific, more like she was memorizing what I had brought, examining each item before placing it back exactly where it had been. Then she went to the vanity, picking up my hairbrush, studying the strands of hair caught in it. She held it up to her face, and I swear she smelled it. I wanted to scream, to jump up and confront her, but fear kept me frozen in place. What if this wasn't really happening? What if I was dreaming? But I knew I wasn't. The terror coursing through my veins was too real. She moved closer to the bed, and I forced my breathing to stay deep and regular. She stood there for what felt like hours, just watching me sleep. Then she reached out and touched my pillow, right next to my head, her fingers brushing against my hair. I couldn't help it. I flinched. Her hand withdrew immediately, and without a sound, she glided out of the room. The lock clicked behind her. I was up and packing before the sound of her footsteps had faded. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night, or that I hadn't paid for my second night's stay. I had to get out of there. As I crept downstairs with my suitcase, I heard Nora's voice from the darkness. Leaving so soon? She was sitting in a rocking chair in the corner of the living room, barely visible in the shadows. She hadn't turned any lights on. I'm not feeling well, I stammered. I think I should go home. But I've been so enjoying watching you sleep, she said, her voice dreamy. It's been so long since I had a guest who sleeps as peacefully as you do. I ran, out the door, down the porch steps, to my car. As I fumbled with my keys, I looked back at the house. Nora stood in the doorway, still rocking slightly back and forth, though there was no chair beneath her. I drove straight home, taking back roads and highways alike at whatever speed would get me there fastest. When I finally walked into my apartment, I took the longest, hottest shower of my life, trying to wash away the feeling of being watched. Later, I tried to leave a review warning others about the Willow Creek BB, but I couldn't find the listing anywhere. It had vanished from the internet as if it had never existed. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, but then I'll be unpacking something from my suitcase and catch a whiff of that house, old lace and dust and something else, something wrong, and I'll remember Nora, standing in my room, watching me sleep. I still take weekend trips sometimes, but I stick to chain hotels now. Places with key cards instead of antique keys, and plenty of other guests around. And I always check that my door has a deadbolt that works from the inside. The scratching sound started 3 nights after I moved into my new house. At first, I dismissed them as branches against the windows or maybe mice in the walls, normal sounds in an older home. But when I found deep gouges on my front door one morning, I knew I needed better security. The local hardware store was my first stop, a small place called Smith's that had probably been there since the town was founded. A bell jangled overhead as I walked in, and the smell of sawdust and metal filled my nose. The aisles were narrow, cramped with everything from paint cans to garden tools, all coated in a thin layer of dust. Behind the counter stood a man who looked as weathered as his store, probably in his late 60s gras with hands that showed years of hard work. He glanced up as I approached, his expression unreadable. "I need a new door lock," I said, trying to sound casual. Something sturdy. The change in his demeanor was instant. His face hardened, and he straightened up like I'd said something offensive. "We don't sell those to outsiders." I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "Locks," he said, drawing out the word like he was speaking to a child. "We don't sell them to people who aren't from here. Town policy." I let out a nervous laugh. That's got to be a joke, right? I live here now. I bought the Peterson place on Oak Street. His eyes narrowed. Living here doesn't make you one of us. You can buy other things, nails, tools, whatever you need, but not locks. We don't allow that. Don't allow it. It's a lock. For basic security. How can you not allow that? He leaned forward, placing his palms flat on the counter. Listen carefully. This town has rules. One of those rules is that outsiders don't get to lock their doors. It's not safe for us. My skin prickled. Not safe for you? What about what's safe for me? You'll understand in time, he said, his voice softer now but somehow more menacing. Or you'll leave. Most of them leave. I backed away from the counter, my heart racing. This had to be some kind of joke, some small-town hazing of the newcomer. I drove to the next town over and bought the best lock I could find, along with a door reinforcement kit. No small-town superstitions were going to keep me from feeling secure in my own home. That night, as I installed the new lock, I could feel eyes on me. I looked out the windows several times but saw nothing except darkness. Still, I knew I was being watched. The scratching started again around midnight, louder this time. It moved from the front door to each window in turn, like something was testing every entrance. I checked each lock twice and then sat in my living room, listening as whatever it was circled my house. In the morning, I found new scratches around my door frame, deeper than before, and something else. A note pushed under my door, written in shaky handwriting, "Take it off." I crumpled the note and threw it away. They were trying to scare me, that was all. I wasn't going to let them win. But things escalated. Each night, the scratching got louder, more insistent. More notes appeared. Remove the lock. You were warned. It's not safe. I started sleeping with all my lights on, jumping at every sound. Then came the knocking. Not normal knocking. This was rhythmic, deliberate, moving from door to door again. It would start at exactly 3 a.m. and continue until sunrise. When I looked outside, I never saw anyone, but I could hear them moving around my house, whispering just quietly enough that I couldn't make out the words. After a week of this, I broke down and went back to the hardware store. The old man didn't look surprised to see me. "Ready to take it off?" he asked without preamble. "Why?" I demanded. "Why can't I have a lock on my door?" He sighed, suddenly looking much older. "Some things are better left alone. The town needs access. It's just how things work here." "Access to what? My house? Why would you need that?" He didn't answer, just stared at me with those faded eyes. After a long moment, he said, "You should leave, while you still can." That night, the knocking was different. Instead of moving around the house, it stayed at my front door. Constant, demanding. The whispers were louder too, and for the first time, I could make out words. "Let us in. We need to come in. You have to let us in." I sat with my back against the door, my whole body shaking. The new lock held, but the door frame was starting to splinter. Whatever was out there wanted in, and the lock was making them angry. Around dawn, everything went quiet. I waited an hour before looking outside. My front porch was empty, but something had been carved into my door, right above the lock. Last warning. I took the lock off that morning. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the screwdriver. As I removed the last screw, I heard movement behind me. I turned to find the old man from the hardware store standing at the end of my driveway. "Smart choice," he said, nodding approvingly. "You'll sleep better now." "What is this place?" I asked, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "What kind of town doesn't allow locks?" He just smiled, turned, and walked away. That night was the quietest I'd had since moving in. No scratching, no knocking, no whispers. But somehow that was worse because now I knew, really knew, that something could come in any time it wanted. I put my house on the market the next day. The realtor seemed unsurprised when I said I was moving, like she'd been expecting it. When I asked about other houses for sale in town, she gave me an odd look. "There aren't any," she said. "No one new moves here anymore. They all leave eventually. The ones who try to fight it, who try to keep things locked up tight, they leave fastest of all." I stayed in a hotel in the next town over until my house sold, which happened surprisingly quickly. The buyers were locals, a fact that seemed to please everyone in town. On my last day there, as I was loading the final boxes into my moving truck, the hardware store owner appeared again. "Some places are meant to stay open," he said cryptically. "Some doors aren't meant to be locked. Remember that, wherever you go next." I did remember. I moved to a big city, where no one questions the need for locks and security systems. But sometimes, late at night, I hear scratching at my door and I wonder if they followed me. I wonder if somewhere, in that small town, new people are moving in, trying to lock their doors, learning the hard way that some places have rules that can't be broken. And every night, before I go to bed, I check my locks. All of them. Even though a small voice in the back of my mind whispers that maybe, just maybe, locks only make things worse.